This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate first part of What If Kid Naruto joined Root ANBU Black Ops. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
From his office window, Sandaime Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen gazed down at the village. The village was ablaze with fireworks, bonfires, silk paper lanterns, and orange, golden, and red lights. Yellow Flash's memorial festival was in full swing. He was certain that Minato would have been pleased with them after 13 years of their speedy recuperation and their recently discovered acceptance of a certain Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto gained the boy a lot of respect for his bold rescue attempt that ultimately prevented him from calling on Shinigami to make Orochimaru flee, his defeat of Sabaku no Gara, his role in bringing Tsunade of the Sannin back to the village to heal him, and everyone else still in the hospital, and his ability to drag back one stubborn Uchiha Sasuke. As amused as some might have been at the idea of the noisy boy having any scars, Naruto's patience and perseverance were causing them to heal. Overall, this might have been the first memorial festival of Yellow Flash that Naruto had ever enjoyed. Hiruzen was about to do something that he would have preferred not to do. The thought of his student not being proud of him at all made him feel sick to his stomach. With his back to his window, the elderly Hokage scowled pitifully at the last document he needed to finish before he could join the masses below in their festivities. One of his responsibilities as the Sandaime was to make at least a token appearance, even though he didn't feel like celebrating. His former rival Danzo's registration request for a new ninja into the Root program was the final document on his desk. Naturally, it didn't say Root. The old man would have been imprisoned before he could say, busted, if he had acknowledged the existence of the illegal ANBU branch. Danzo was asking Kyuubi no Yoko's Jinchuriki, Uzumaki Naruto, to be his apprentice. Too many people believed that the ninja were only to be used as tools in their respective villages. This was to promote the nin in question so they could be even more effective tools, not to call in a therapist, give them happy pills, and take away all of their sharp, pointy possessions because they were emotionless, obedient, vicious, and totally screwed in the head. Until they broke and a new one replaced them, of course, since all tools eventually break. Even though it was cruel, the majority of those who made it through the training became excellent nin. Naturally, Uchiha Itachi only occurs once in 10. Sarutobi had to deal with members of his own council concealing Root in their closets among the other skeletons because for some people, this setback was not significant enough to give up and let humans be humans. This was going to be different. He dipped his pen into the ink in the little jade inkwell and slowly, grudgingly swirled the ink, whispering, "Forgive me, Minato-kun. Please forgive me, Naruto-kun." The slightly burned desktop beneath the piece of paper was a reminder of an afternoon when Naruto had been eating lukewarm takeout ramen in his office and decided to reheat it with a fireball. Danzo played behind Hokage's back at the most inconvenient moment, even though, in theory, he had to go through the Hokage to bring in new Root members. Danzo had attempted to use his new apprentice program for ninja showing early ANBU potential to enlist half of the graduating class the year before. Evidently, he had hoped that Sarutobi would sign the documents on his desk without going through them all in his haste to leave the office to purchase the new Icha Classics collection, hardback edition with author's autograph. Fortunately for the Genin.to.be, Sarutobi had focused on his work that afternoon and Jiraiya always sent his old teacher his publications. He had had enough of the Root. The Root had to leave. Uzumaki Naruto was forced to visit the Root as a result. Jiraiya was tattooing a surveillance seal onto Naruto's back as they conversed. For the next 2 months, it would capture every conversation Naruto had. 60.1 days. Furthermore, Naruto was unable to comprehend that one of his valued people had not actually turned him over to the monster puppet master during those 60.1 days. Even though Shinobi were supposed to be masters of deception, Naruto was a terrible liar, and this was probably Sarutobi's best chance to finally put an end to Danzo's schemes. The tattoo that was applied to his back at that precise moment, in Naruto's opinion, was meant to help control Kyuubi, and he thought he had been deceived. 61 days. I pray your endurance will carry you through one more time. I'm so sorry, Sarutobi murmured, and he signed the document with a slightly shaking hand. Sarutobi Hiruzen wallowing in remorse in his office while dazzling fireworks repeatedly tinted it red and gold and upbeat music played outside. In vain he brooded. Naruto was a skilled shinobi, but he was supposed to create a terrible weapon despite his incapacity to tell a convincing lie. It was just lousy. Horrible, not terrifying. Horrible. Danzo's rule over his soldiers was founded on 5 principles, each of which had the potential to have him killed for merely revealing their existence. One is the selection of candidates, either at an early age or with a pre-existing dysfunction. 2. That there was a perceived danger to their safety and that they knew he would follow through on it. 3. The existence of a seemingly insignificant act of kindness, which is obviously insufficient to evoke strong feelings in them. 4. Being cut off from viewpoints different from his own. And 5. Their apparent helplessness to get out of the predicament. Because he was freed at the age of 10 when the orphanage decided they could no longer care for him, Naruto was obstinate, fearless, fiercely independent, and sufficiently irreverent to paint the Hokage monument. In Konoha, his ability to help those that others would have considered hopeless cases was already well known. Additionally, he considered it the greatest thing ever to be chosen for the ANBU training program. Danzo ought to have been more aware. As he shifted his weight from one leg to the other, Naruto was fairly vibrating with anticipation. He had been guided by the ferret, masked man into a sizable training chamber beneath ANBU headquarters. High and roomy, one wall was covered in a variety of weapons that were carefully kept and displayed, including elegant katana and long naginata, as well as shorter wakizashi and daisho that were better suited for a nin who had to conceal his weapons. Beautiful bows of all sizes are displayed alongside plain bow made of bamboo and hardwood, as well as war fans from Suna, Sai, Tonfa, Nunchaku, and ordinary kunai, senbon, and shuriken. Naruto reasoned that if they possessed such weapons, their jutsu library must be evil. Naruto only lamented that he was not permitted to inform his teammates or anybody else of his whereabouts and activities. It was far superior to what the slothful Kakashi would teach Sasuke. His joy was cut short when a door at the other end of the room opened, revealing a red-haired woman in her mid-20s wearing a hakama. Her footsteps reverberated through the empty space. Despite not being in Sakura-chan's or Tsunade-bachan's class, she was fairly attractive. Her dark eyes were harsh and stern, and her hair was cropped to just below her chin. She was examining Naruto, seemingly unimpressed, but Naruto had long since stopped being threatened by such subtlety. With his brightest smile, he said, "I'm Uzumaki Naruto, nice to meet you. Are you my new sensei?" He didn't want to come across as lazy or uninterested because he wanted to make a good first impression. For a brief moment, her expression appeared surprised, but she quickly recovered as if nothing had changed. "I am Okubo Hibari. When speaking to people outside ANBU you will refer to me as Crane. Sensei. I have understood that the education you received at the academy was lacking in many respects. This will be corrected. I will work you to the ground so you can be of some use to Danzo Sama." Her voice was uniform and devoid of feelings. "That's great," cried Naruto. Hibari Sensei's expression didn't even move this time, but Naruto sensed that she wasn't used to such fervor. He took care to keep his dazzling smile intact. He was deeply troubled by her eyes. They brought to mind Gaara's, Sasuke's, and Haku's. There was ample evidence that it was agonizing, and she was afraid she might not be able to handle it. Before Iruka, Sensei definitively demonstrated that he saw Naruto and not what the rest of the village saw. A rabid Biju on a rotting leash. He had a hunch that his own had also looked like that. Although Naruto wasn't particularly perceptive, he was able to sense when someone was desperate for recognition. Naruto decided to treat her extra kindly and refrain from torturing her the way he had Kakashi, Sensei and Jiraiya. Sensei because it was clear that she needed a good friend. He understood what it was like to have no one to talk to, no one to ask how you were feeling after a bad day, and no one to wish you a happy birthday. He inquired, "When is your birthday?" "Hibari." Sensei's face twitched once more. It was a very small twitch, but he was skilled at observing the small muscles surrounding the eyes after figuring out the difference between Sasuke's frown number 1, broody, and frown number 2, homicidal, which should not be confused with annoyed narrowing of eyes and arrogant twitch of eyebrow. 23rd of August, not that I see what benefit this information is to you. I will now take you to the Root HQ. You will share a room with another young shinobi, Sai, who will show you around and give you your training schedule. I will have my way with you 7 am tomorrow, don't be late. Also, be aware that if you disclose to any outside Root its existence, the way to the HQ or any secrets you will learn there, even to superior officers not en route, your life will be forfeit. Hibari. Sensei spun around as she was speaking and escorted Naruto through the door to a second staircase that descended. Fortunately, this prevented his new sensei from seeing the flush that came up his cheeks. Although Hibari Sensei's innuendo was undoubtedly intended, Naruto, a teenager still getting to know his hormones, couldn't help but blush at it. However, unlike Jiraiya Sensei, Kakashi Sensei, or Ebisu, who had briefly been his sensei, he was completely devoted to Sakura Chan and wasn't perverted. In any case, why was he receiving all the perverted sensei? He gave Hibari sensei a suddenly suspicious look, but he bravely kicked the interest his hormones were taking into submission, ignoring the death threat entirely in the process. He had never been aware that women could be perverts and had always assumed that the second X chromosome somehow prevented it, but given his history of bad luck with teachers, he could never be completely certain. Just to be sure, he asked, "You aren't gonna read perverted books while I train or do anything else perverted, are you?" After arriving at a tiny cleaning closet and bending over to remove a heavy metal cover that appeared to lead to sewers, Hibari sensei stopped her work and looked directly into Naruto's eyes. She was clearly offended, and her expression was clear for the first time. Of course not. Her tone was prim and clipped, and she gave Naruto a hint of her intention to kill. Sheepishly, he rubbed the back of his head. "Sorry, but Kakashi sensei and Jiraiya sensei did that all the time," he said. "You aren't gonna be 3 hours late from training or wander off and leave me alone either, right?" "No, Hibari." Sensei raised the cover, but her emotionless gaze remained fixed on Naruto's face. Even though the sewer air smelled musty and damp, it was still far cleaner than it should be. Naruto shouted, "This is going to be so amazing," and pumped his fist. Then, shouting with delight, he leapt into the dark sewer. It should be mentioned that before Jiraiya told him that he was going to be Danzo's apprentice, Naruto had never heard of Root because he had slept through the majority of Konoha's history. Being Naruto, he also hadn't considered looking up the man's information. So far, it looks like this route will be the coolest place ever. They had a secret underground entrance, and Hibari sensei was going to teach him amazing jutsu and even spar with him. If he had been able to impress Sakura Chan with it, that would have been the only improvement. It would have been nice to shake hands in secret as well. He glanced up at Hibari sensei as he descended the ladder. "Do we have a secret handshake? Suborn count 0 on day 1. Confirmation of the root's existence and Danzo's involvement, as well as an order to lie to higher ranking officers under threat of death, are all documented by the surveillance seal." As it turned out, Naruto's favorite training room wasn't actually a part of Root HQ. After a somewhat lengthy walk through a sewer that was illuminated by dim yellow light bulbs and was far too dry and clean to be a part of any actual sewer network, Hibari sensei led him into a tiny entry hall that was watched over by 2 shinobi in masks that Naruto found extremely odd. One of them had a somewhat monkey-like appearance, but he had already seen the monkey ANBU, so it wasn't her mask. The cat's eyes had odd curved lines that Naruto didn't recognize, and it wasn't a she at all. Naruto was a little let down by the other mask, which may have been a highly stylized raccoon. Since fox would have been too obvious, he had considered wearing a raccoon mask in honor of Gaara. The monkey nodded, letting them march inside. Crane returning. "I bring Firefly with me. The normal procedure will be passed due to Danzo Sama's orders," Hibari sensei said. It took him a few seconds to process Hibari's words because he was so excited about becoming a true ANBU trainee before Sasuke even made a normal Jonin and disappointed that he wasn't able to become Raccoon. Hibari sensei gave him a mocking look at his outburst. "What do you mean, Firefly? Do I look like a firefly to you? Toads eat fireflies?" the man said. Undisciplined wailing over matters of no consequence, or indeed anything, is not tolerated in Root. "You have been registered as Firefly and that Alias will in no way hinder your duties," she warned him. "What relevance does Toad's ability to eat fireflies bear in this, anyway?" she inquired. "Nothing," mumbled Naruto as he slammed his head against a wall. He was prohibited by Ero sensei from telling anyone en route that he had given Naruto such extensive training. The damage had already been done when it came to calling forth toads, but he had instructed Naruto to avoid bringing up the topic in order to prevent anyone from becoming overly interested in it. In particular, he was not supposed to disclose his Rasengan usage to anyone. He assumed the pervy Sanin had a good reason, but he had no idea why it was such a big deal. Perhaps. He muttered angrily under his breath, "Good for you to act all cool, you have an animal that can be taken seriously," as he trailed his new sensei deeper into the underground base. Then he asked, "What did you mean by the normal procedure? He was a special case, wasn't that awesome? It's almost cool enough to make you forget about the Firefly thing." Every member of the Root had a cursed seal imprinted by Danzo on their tongue, close to the back of their throat, which would paralyze them completely if they spoke about Root or Danzo, making it impossible for them to move or speak. Jiraiya, Konohagakure no Sato's unofficial spy master and undisputed seal master, had obtained a report about the Kyuubi seal that one of Danzo's aides had stolen. In it, he cautioned the Hokage against using any seals on Naruto other than chakra suppression seals since they would damage Yondaimi's seal and put the entire village in jeopardy. Jiraiya was the only one with sufficient Fuinjutsu skill to recognize that the seal alone was a bunch of bullshit. Danzo had made the decision to pass the process because of this and the fact that the seal wasn't infallible in the first place. The root nin's continued ability to write reports shows that it didn't stop the bearer from writing down and giving over any information. To which Hibari Sensei replied, "Nothing that concerns you." Following a number of detours, Hibari Sensei opened a door, bringing them to a spacious hall from which numerous smaller corridor tunnels branched. Each of the doors that lined them was locked and made of a dark, fresh smelling wood. They proceeded to the 9th door in the second corridor, which appeared to be identical to the doors next to it. Hibari Sensei gave it a hard knock, and it was only then that Naruto noticed she was wearing bulky, dark green leather gloves. They were quite strange additions to her traditional hakama, but a young shinobi entered through the door before Naruto could ask. Naruto pointed to the boy his age and exclaimed, "No way, are you Sasuke? Kun's long lost identical twin or something?" The strange gloves were instantly forgotten. It was uncanny how much he resembled Sasuke. The midriff, exposing shirt that Sasuke wouldn't have worn under threat of torture death made the resemblance even more unsettling, though it also added a humorous element to the situation. Sai's smile, however, was the most unsettling of all. Even though his mouth was picture perfect and his eyes were closed, he somehow managed to rank second only to Orochimaru on the creep scale. Naruto first started to suspect Root at that point. Perhaps Hibari Sensei was an anomaly, but what about Sai? When they were on the mission to protect Princess Yuki, Kakashi Sensei had once told them, "Once is a pity, twice might be a coincidence, but 3 times is already a pattern." Okay, so he had to hold off until he spotted a third individual who wasn't wearing a mask. However, it was fortunate that he was present because these folks were in dire need of someone to instill some common sense and feeling in them. "This is Sai. He will take over from here." Hibari Sensei turned around and marched away without saying any more goodbyes. Naruto yelled, "Have a good day, Hibari Sensei," and held out his hand to Sai. He frowned disapprovingly when he caught a glimpse of Sai's room, which was now his room as well. Apart from the closet, 2 desks, and futon, it was completely empty. Everything was dull beige and gray, as if it had been washed colorless. Sai obviously had no decorating skills. Everything was pleading for a little orange. Sadly, Naruto came to the conclusion that his plants would not be able to survive without sunlight. He wouldn't take his plants there to perish because they trusted him. Saying, "It's nice to meet you, Sai-kun." Sai examined his hand as though it were an exotic animal, then took it, gave it 2 shakes, and then released it. He said in a pleasant voice that was completely different from Sasuke, "Kun's, good day, Naruto-kun. I have read a book about this. Does this mean we are friends now?" Taking Sai's hand, he pulled him toward the main hallway. As Sai started their sightseeing tour, Naruto chattered away, "Yep, so it's time you show me around. We are gonna be training together, right?" While the other shinobi guided him through a corridor where an unsightly concrete bridge crossed an underground river with dark, swift water that was aesthetically pleasing in contrast, he asked his new friend, "What's your mask?" Naruto reasoned that perhaps the river was another hidden entrance after he saw a ladder descend in the shadows beneath the bridge. Sai didn't show it to him if it was. Sai declared, "That is a secret," and smiled at him with her eyes closed once more. "Don't tell me there is something even more embarrassing than Firefly. Is it Bunny?" He joked. If Jiraiya Sensei discovered that the renowned Bunny ANBU from his Icha infiltration wasn't actually a woman, he would be devastated. Sai appeared unimpressed. He didn't look like anything, though. He made the bunny ear headband in a clear moment of self-destructive stupidity, but he couldn't imagine how his face would look if Jiraiya gave it to him. Like the apartment complex where they had begun, the underground labyrinth of tunnels and complexes was so vast that Naruto reasoned that it must have been at least as big as the entire Uchiha district, only underground. Due to necessity, it was extremely bare and drab looking, and there was also no natural light. The place was extremely confining, which is why Naruto now understood why Sai was so pale and why he was eager for his first day to end so he could go outside. He questioned his new friend, "Didn't you have my schedule, Sai-kun?" When he was not on duty, he wanted to see. Without a word, Sai handed him a piece of paper that had been folded twice from his pocket. Each day, Crane is the instructor for the 7 to 11 ninjutsu training session. 11 o'clock minus 11 to 30 is the lunch break. Taijutsu instruction from 12 to 16 with instructor Crane. Additionally, every Wednesday and Friday, Otter, the instructor, tactics, and strategy, 16 to 18. Every other Monday, evaluation discussion with Councilman Danzo at 16.00. Every other Tuesday, Crane, the instructor, will be teaching Kenjutsu from 15 to 19. Anyone else would have protested the schedule's insanely harshness after just one glance. Since Danzo wanted to eliminate any opposition from his minions as soon as possible, the person in question would have been promptly given a punishment detail on top of it. But this wasn't anyone, it was Naruto. One of the lesser known facts about being the Jinchuriki of Kyuubi no Yoko was that, unless he had just been beaten to within inches of unconsciousness, Naruto acted like a 5-year-old on sugar and caffeine for a reason. When the circumstances in which Yondaime Hokage had to design the seal were taken into account, the result was an unimaginable masterpiece that gradually bled Kyuubi's chakra into Naruto's. However, hurried work is never flawless, and the seal's main drawback was that it was impossible to stop the chakra transfer once it had started. Naruto was unable to stop the constant flow of Kyuubi's chakra, or strength. Naruto was consequently left with an abundance of energy and little to do with it. When given the right motivation, Naruto would frequently train himself to the ground because he relished the sense of relaxation it provided. He turned to Sai, who once again gave him the eerie, hollow smile. Huh, looks cool. I bet Hibari Sensei knows all kinds of cool jutsu and moves. Tactics sound boring, though. Do you know who Otter Sensei is? He asked. Crane Senpai is indeed a very commendable kunoichi. As to Otter Senpai's identity, he will reveal it to you if he sees fit, Sai replied. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, he stopped grinning and cocked his head, staring at Naruto. Are you sure the schedule isn't too harsh for you, Naruto-kun? Asked he. Every time he declared that he would one day be Hokage, Naruto gave him his most assured smile, the one that split his face because it was as certain as the sun rising the following day. Sai gave him another smile and nodded, but it was just as phony as before, and Naruto couldn't take it any longer. Of course not, I'm gonna ace through this, believe it, Sai said. He detested doubters, and he detested it even more when they were silent and he was powerless to refute them. How should we respond to Sai's phony smile? The answer was clear to Naruto. He jabbed his new teammate and guide in the ribs. That creepy smile of yours annoys me and I'm gonna do something about it, he said. Sai arched an eyebrow, and for a moment, Naruto felt homesick despite still being in the same village as the haughty, conceited prima donna. Ninja. He looked so much like Sasuke. Sai's posture slightly changed as he asked, how do you propose to do it? Naruto couldn't understand why, but it felt like he was getting ready for a fight. There was no justification for conflict. Tickle torture. He then swooped down on Sai like Kami. Sama's very merry wrath, latching his fingers on Sai's armpits and sides and tickling him mercilessly. Extremely ticklish people frequently begin laughing before they are actually tickled, which suggests that laughing in response to tickling is a nervous reaction that can be triggered. Sai, a highly disciplined shinobi of Root, didn't laugh or even smile, but there was a strange upward twitch in his mouth that was half panic and half smile. He remained as rigid as a steel rod in Naruto's arms for a few moments before releasing himself with a single, fluid motion and taking a few steps back, eyeing Naruto with far more caution than when he had prepared for a fight. Naruto said, see, you smiled, and he laughed. I didn't, did I? Sai said confidently at first, but his tone soon faltered. Sai dragged the corners of his mouth upward to mimic the initial startled twitch. Well, not really, but it was better than your creepy smile. Your lips twitched kind of right way. Just try to keep them like that and think happy thought, like ramen. That's exactly how it appeared. It wasn't too bad, but I was having a, I'm being polite to the crazy person, is he going to do something? Kind of smile. It seemed to Naruto that Sai was finally thinking what he appeared to be thinking, and that was a positive step, wasn't it? The fact that Naruto was missing was discovered by his teammates in less than a day. The Hokage had been forced to pull a rank after spending 2 hours listening to Kakashi's vehement protests about sending his student and his sensei's son into Root, the serpent's nest. In his somewhat agitated state, Kakashi had left his office and neglected to tell Sasuke and Sakura about the cover story, that Naruto had gone on a lengthy training trip with Jiraiya. He had simply shunshined into the waiting Sakura and Sasuke's training grounds. Sakura yelled, "You are in time," and even Sasuke struggled to keep his jaw from dropping to his chest. But Kakashi wasn't in the mood to play his typical games. Sasuke easily caught the scroll he threw at them out of the air. "Study these jutsu," he had commanded, avoiding the spotlight, his lone eye cold and steely. Sasuke grudgingly said, "We should probably wait for Naruto-san," as he peered eagerly at the scroll. "Eventually, he will learn something beneficial rather than engaging in more pointless tree walking." Naturally, his rival, who was an idiot and a friend of sorts, had picked that day to be late. "Well, he is our teammate," Sakura scowled. Sasuke shrugged and sat back down on the rock, and she followed suit. "What do you think has gotten into Kakashi? Sensei?" He looked really terse. Though not so close that he would have bothered to move, she was seated a bit closer than he felt comfortable. Instead, he opened the old yellow scroll with dark blue borders, but he wasn't thinking about it. It was amusing how Uzumaki Naruto had been on their minds a lot lately, much like a cat circling hot porridge. A certain aspect of their teammates simply didn't make sense. If he could make the kind of progress he did in strengthening himself, why had his academic performance been so poor? In connection with that, they had refused to explain to any child they had heard about the peculiar animosity of the villagers. Could Naruto's education have been ruined by someone? Although there were many rumors that Mizuki Sensei had been arrested the day after the Academy Genin test, the offense he had committed involved classified material. Given that the majority of senior Jonin could only generate single-digit numbers of Kage Bunshin, why was Naruto so despised? How much chakra did he possess anyway? And there was the Gamabunta issue, of course. The boss toad. Sasuke knew exactly what he was talking about when he said, "What I want to know is how he summoned that giant toad. Jutsu like that takes more than just a lot of chakra." Gamabunta's a Sanin level summon. He had done his research after Naruto had summoned the toad boss to capture him in the Valley of the End. Sakura fell silent in contemplation. Sakura said, "Maybe he has a bloodline? In threatening situations I've seen him use a different sort of chakra. It was red, actually visible, and had kind of ominous aura. It is difficult to explain." He didn't need her explanation. Reminiscent of Inuzuka's Shikyaku no Jutsu, Sasuke recalled Naruto crouching on all fours like a predator. With blue light leaking between long, sharp nails and Rasengan forming in his hands, the dead last of the academy, the dumb ramen topping boy, had growled at him. A shudder ran through his body as he recalled the red chakra that surrounded Naruto, assuming the form of an animal. He also recalled the sound of 1,000 birds chirping and the smell of water. How could he have permitted such a mindless outburst of rage? Is Naruto somehow related to the Inuzuka? If it's a bloodline though, where's the clan? As far as I know, Naruto-san has no family. Sakura suggested, "Let's ask around a bit later, see if we can find anything on it," her eyes gleaming. He must have had parents at one point, obviously. Sasuke had to acknowledge that she had been improving, but the conceited, gossip-loving fangirl continued to take up a significant portion of his pink-haired teammates' thoughts. "Shouldn't we just ask him, Sakura-san? Maybe we shouldn't," Sakura thought. "He's an orphan. I mean, how would you feel, Sasuke-kun, if Naruto-san suddenly started bombarding you with questions about your dead relatives?" Sasuke didn't have to respond. They continued to wait, but Naruto never showed up. It wasn't until they started training independently that they realized Kakashi Sensei hadn't instructed them when to stop. They had to admit that perhaps Naruto wasn't coming after 2 hours, when Sakura had learned 1 C-level jutsu and Sasuke 3. The wind that did blow was hot, as if it had passed through an oven, and there was very little of it. Sasuke dabbed at a drop of perspiration that had smudged his forehead. Sakura worriedly pressed her lower lip between her teeth and said, "Kakashi Sensei was so angry when he left. Do you think something has happened?" With a somber expression, Sasuke nodded. Naruto had been treated much more kindly lately, but he was simply too trusting. It's possible that someone feigned it and did something. If he had known why Naruto had been so despised in the first place, it would have been much simpler for him to gauge the threat level and likelihood. He was friendly but an idiot. They grew more interested and concerned about Naruto the more they discussed the matter and thought about it. Before they entered the academy, they discovered how much they knew about his past. Except for their former teachers, Iruka Sensei in particular, they were unable to identify anyone who knew Naruto personally outside of the group that included the Rookie 9, Guy Sans team, and now that Irigara. And, now that I think about it, where did Naruto reside? It was usually safe to go to the Ichirakus if someone wanted to find him off duty. Even his teammates hadn't visited his home, but they wanted to find him now. According to Sasuke, this needs to be investigated. When Naruto had almost forced him to return to Konoha, he initially hated him. His mind had burned even as they had hobbled through the gates together, each relying on the other for support. In the long run, however, Naruto had prevented Sasuke from being possessed by Orochimaru and had prevented him from becoming Nukenin like Itachi. He didn't like that he had to remain in Konoha and recover at such a painfully slow rate, but since all nin were considered legal adults, accepting that nothing in this world comes for free was a necessary part of growing up. He had learned all of this from the immature fool Naruto. Sakura said in a low voice, "What if something bad has happened to him?" Sasuke noticed that she was suppressing her tears as her large, green eyes gleamed. Naruto may be an immature fool, but he was their immature fool. If he is in danger we will save him, and if he has already been hurt there will be hell to pay. As part of Naruto's cover story, Sannin Jiraiya had left the town in the meantime. Still tormented by guilt, the Hokage thought Sakura and Sasuke had been told the cover story. A certain Hitaki Kakashi had already forgotten that he hadn't told his students while he was getting thoroughly sloshed in the middle of the day in a small inn. Amino Iruka, a teacher at Ichiraku's academy, was worried because Naruto was never late for ramen and he had been meant to meet him there 30 minutes prior. Additionally, Uzumaki Naruto had blissfully neglected to notify Iruka Sensei that he would not be attending Route HQ. "I'm sorry. Danzo, you are sorely lacking." On Saturday, Naruto joined Route, and on Sunday, he trained. Hibari Sensei had made the decision to divide his training in ninjutsu in half. She would work with Naruto's chakra control every other day until he was able to actually conserve his strength. On the other days, he would give him jutsu that he could use immediately, giving him instant gratification. She started from scratch with his taijutsu and nujutsu, preventing him from giving in to his kyubi born tendency to fall to all fours and kicking his ass whenever he did. She gave Naruto a small wooden tablet on the second day, with 6 thin lines in every color of the rainbow drawn on it. The more chakra he directed into it, the more white light would illuminate the lines he drew with chakra. Sensitive ink. The tablet would blow up if he channeled too much. The exercise was to be repeated until only one line was lit. Her decision to give him 100 pills was most likely prescient. After exploding the 7th tablet in a cloud of tiny, sharp wooden shrapnel, he asked her, "Why are you wearing those gloves all the time?" Hibari Sensei's hands were pleasantly sure as she used pincers to remove the splinters from his. Without the gloves, even handling the pincers would have been much simpler. The grip painfully tightened, if only momentarily, as he asked her. She picked up a small splinter from where it had become lodged between his little and ring fingers and said, "You wouldn't like what's underneath, without humor or grace." "I sure would. I like Hibari Sensei, so there's no way I wouldn't like your hands too," he said. However, that infuriated her, and she evidently enjoyed pointing out all the shortcomings in his ninjutsu and taijutsu throughout the day and delivering more powerful kicks and hits than the day before. Why people had to be so complex was beyond Naruto's comprehension. They were meant to be pleased if you spoke to them in a pleasant manner, right? Even though he had promised to like whatever she was hiding, Hibari Sensei had simply become irate despite his desire to make her happy. That was Naruto's nindo. He never broke his word. Nothing Naruto did that day was good enough, and Hibari Sensei's lovely face was closed that day, like a window with shutters inside. He also had his first evaluation talk with Danzo on Monday. Not much needed to be assessed yet, but that wasn't the purpose. Danzo planned to start Naruto's descent into his most powerful weapon, the feather in his cap. After all, Hiruzen Sarutobi was elderly and had not yet appointed a successor. After all, a man with a force capable of leveling the entire village would be in a prime position to choose the next Hokage, and Sarutobi's health had declined since Orochimaru's attack. In order to avoid having more time than necessary to develop his ace in the hole, he might decide to give up the office at any time. Uzumaki Naruto was seated across from him when they first met in his office. Danzo appeared so innocent as he lied with his words, his smile, and his entire body. He asked the boy who was resting restlessly on the chair in front of him, "How have you found your training, Naruto?" Danzo was going to order Naruto to give up his orange jumpsuits, even though he had been given sensible black, or at least dark green, and gray clothes. Additionally, to discipline him in the event that the Uzumaki boy shows resistance. His newest initiate responded, "It's cool enough, though Hibari Sensei's a bit odd." "Size odd too, but he's nice and that ink thing he does is way great," his carefree smile revealing a very white set of teeth that were slightly too sharp to be anyone's. Despite his small size, he would become Danzo's beast. He frowned and remarked, "I've understood that you have not complained about your schedule, although 3 days wasn't much time for a nin to exhaust themselves. All academy graduates had learned to understand their limitations, and it seems that Uzumaki Naruto's were greater than he had expected. He told his most recent convert, "I will schedule art lessons for you. Sai-kun will be the one to teach you." Naruto's face was contorted in a grimace, just as he had anticipated. "I can't use the painting. Fighting," Sai said. "My chakra pollutes the ink. Other than that, drawing's useless." "When you are a shinobi, there is no useless skill," Danzo told the skeptic boy seated across from him. "The ability to draw is a very important thing for all ninja to possess." Naruto was fidgeting on the chair and tapping the floor with his feet, his voice unconvinced. "Really? Why?" he asked. Danzo let out a sigh. Naruto would have to act as though he cared about his well-being, at least for the time being, because he wasn't abused to the point of being desperate to please. He gave it to the untidy-haired boy after taking the most recent edition of the Iwa Bingo book out of his pocket. Abukara Aki, an A-class Jonin from Kusagakure, opened the book at the beginning and said, "Bingo book. So cool, do I get one?" A picture of a woman with a long nose and her hair pulled back in a ponytail stared at him from the page. He commanded, "Look on page 60.2. When Naruto reached Zabusa in the book and saw that they hadn't yet reported him dead, he snorted. However, Naruto turned the leaf quickly because he remembered Haku's frantic eyes and the warm, pungent smell of his blood on his hands, which he had feared would never be removed. "This is, name. Unknown," he wrote. A. Class. Description. Black hair, brown eyes, wears glasses, mole above collarbone. Weapons of choice. He stopped speaking. Dryly, Danzo questioned, "It would be more helpful if they had at least a sketch, wouldn't it? Or a good portrait?" After returning the bingo book, he took his notebook, the one with the Icha cover, from his pocket, opened his pencil, and quickly sketched a schematic of a hypothetical structure. He drew another quick sketch, this time of a traditional mountain landscape with bamboo roots and a crane, saying, "Getting caught smuggling something like this out of Iwagakure is bound to get an undercover agent into trouble." Even though the drawing wasn't very good, he didn't live up to his ideals. No one dared to question him because he was the top dog in this junkyard, so he didn't need to. Danzo gritted his teeth as Naruto asked, "So you never took drawing lessons, did you?" As if he hadn't heard, he went on, "Something quite harmless, isn't it?" "What has that got to do with the building?" exclaimed Naruto, frustrated. "Simple," said Danzo, grinning indulgently. He picked up the pencil once more and drew the diagram of the building over the image, connecting a number of small, hidden spots with lines. He laughed inwardly at Naruto's resigned expression, but his grandfatherly smile remained constant. He hopes to see a lot more of that in the future. So it was art lessons. Let's move on to the next section. While the dog is still wagging its tail, give it a bone and profit from it. I have been given an introductory report of your training. I will order Crane to teach you several S-class Kinjutsu as you have already proved to master one on your own, he stated. He had to concede that, from a subjective perspective, it was pretty clever to use Kage Bushin as training aids by multiplying yourself and the time spent. Ha intended to establish it as the norm. Naruto was jumping on the desk and bouncing up and down. Danzo shuddered when he saw the muddy footprints and wondered how he got his feet muddy after spending days indoors. In reality, Naruto had. He had simply used the cool river entrance without bothering to inform anyone. After all, he couldn't survive without ramen. Crane has praised your training motivation, but it seems to me that you take this with much too light heart. Being a shinobi is a serious business. The future of Konoha depends on the likes of you. Don't you think that it is the time to give up the games of youth and become the adult you have been since you became genin? Asked the man. He was well aware that the only things that young people desired were to be regarded as adults, to play adult games rather than youth ones, and to receive praise. A young person's ego was extremely delicate, and in Uzumaki Naruto's case, it was even more so. Anyone with half a brain could see how desperately he wanted to be respected, to be told that he was deserving, to be acknowledged. After all, he was aware that Shinichiro Mizuki had used it to force Naruto to steal the Kinjutsu scroll. He was unaware that Naruto had gained a great deal of knowledge from that encounter. His eyes were innocent as he asked, "How is it going to make Konoha stronger if I'm unhappy?" He was that naive, really. Danzo simply refused to believe it. He had long since forgotten the lesson of innocence and its obstinate power. Confident that this was the secret to getting Naruto to promise to do anything, he argued, "I'm not asking you to be unhappy, merely serious. I have understood that you wish to be the Hokage someday. To reach that dream you will have to put the naivety of childhood behind and open your eyes to the truth of the world." The most obvious weakness he could target was that. Simply put, it wasn't in the most noticeable person. From there, the discussion veered off course. It was not indoctrination. The Hokage changes the world, not the other way around. I'm going to be the best Hokage ever and I'm going to protect everyone in Konoha. What would be the point if I didn't? And your people need some joy in their lives. Scratch that, they need a life, period. He stated, fear is the mother of morality, though he wasn't entirely sure how they arrived at that conclusion. Naruto countered that he was a very moral person and had no fears. Naruto merely scratched his head, appearing very mild-mannered and sheepish, and apologized without even considering changing his mind when Danzo brought up the incident involving Mizuki and the Kinjutsu scroll. Danzo believed it was likely an accident but good strategy. When Naruto defended his choice to capture Uchiha Sasuke alive and risk him fleeing with Orochimaru instead of handling the final Uchiha like any criminal, he countered, a stroll through any lunatic asylum shows that faith doesn't prove anything. The argument, I was right, was extremely annoying to try to refute. With wide eyes, Naruto questioned, how does it prove that not having faith is a good thing? Danzo was starting to think he was doing it deliberately. It brought to mind new snow and blank sheets of paper on which he could write accounts of murder, bloodshed, and treachery. It was a recipe for trouble to be that pure, even if it was self-delusion or pretending. All things are subject to interpretation. The interpretation that prevails at a given time is dependent of power and not truth. Truth is a figment of human mind, he said. According to Naruto, if someone attempted to turn a lie into truth, they were lying, so it wasn't true. Danzo concluded that Uzumaki Naruto turned the idiot Savon back into an idiot. Feeling completely let down, he left the headquarters for a council meeting. Danzo didn't realize he hadn't told the ingrate to give up Orange until he had already entered the council chambers. All right, the next time he would do that. The annoying genin should at least be exhausted from any resistance by the punishment detail he would endure the moment he disobeyed a direct order. He dismissed his nagging suspicion that Uzumaki Naruto would cause trouble as best he could. He had more than enough emotional baggage for a single genin. What might go wrong? Suborn Count 0 on day 3. The surveillance seal captured Danzo engaging with Root and trying to brainwash a new member by promising to teach them a genin S-class Kinjutsu. Blood plasma, which made up 55% of blood fluid, was 90% water, which was the basis for the Great Vampire Technique, as Naruto had named the new Kinjutsu that Hibari Sensei had taught him, much to her annoyance. Although it wasn't necessary, it was best suited for certain types of water. Once the jutsu practitioner had inflicted a wound on their opponent, even if it was only a small, barely bleeding scrape, they could draw blood through it, making any wound instantly fatal. Since they were ninja and not samurai, it had not been categorized as Kinjutsu for ethical reasons, since it was very easy to unintentionally harm your own blood as well and very few people emerged from a fight unscathed. The prohibited label had been applied. The technique also tended to be deadly for its wielder, particularly if they weren't water-type, in situations where concentration was hard to maintain during a fight. Following his first major victory, Naruto jumped up and down and exclaimed, I'm so going to hit Orochimaru's ass with this the next time I see the bastard. Let's see if Mr. I. can reattach body parts with snakes can make blood of them too. Feeling the hard, unforgiving concrete beneath his feet rather than the ground was still strange. He missed the smell of dirt, grass, and leaves. He was already accustomed to his chakra coiling in his abdomen, which was hot and powerful like a tide. Naruto had expressed his sincere gratitude to Sai for being his most recent test subject, and a small, barely half-inch long scratch had left his right arm red from elbow to fingertips. The floor was covered in brownish-red stains, and there were bloody footsteps leading away from the scene. These were evidence of Naruto's earlier attempts with his fellow root ninja, and the metallic smell of it made Kyuubi restless, excited, and more alert than usual, despite the fact that it was still unable to communicate with him. The puddle beneath his feet was so big that it hadn't even started to solidify yet. From head to toe, Naruto's body was splattered red. Blood had stained his jumpsuit, matted his hair, gotten into his Kyuubi-red eyes, and caked under his fingernails. However, the furball had finally paid its rent in full, and the 7th attempt had been successful. Sai calmly remarked, You sure are energetic, considering the amount of blood you have lost. I wonder if you show such stamina in other activities as well. While Hibari Sensei healed his hand using a healing jutsu without taking off the damned gloves. In the harsh artificial light, he was even paler now. Pale blood loss. Naruto grumbled, mainly in jest, Hibari Sensei, Sai, Kun's weirding me out again. Or something similar. It was just his luck that Sai initially believed his roommate was a pervert when he started saying things like that. He later deduced, however, that it was Sai's attempt at humor. He was trying, but it was a pretty poor attempt. In general, Hibari Sensei didn't provide a response to those arguments, and she didn't do so today either. 6 days had passed since Monday. Naruto had met Otter, his other teacher, a strange man who always wore a mask and wouldn't reveal his name. Though even he acknowledged that was absurd, Naruto had entertained the notion that perhaps he didn't have one. Even if they only had one name, everyone had one. He initially found it strange that Sai didn't have a family name, but over time, he came to understand that Hibari Sensei and he were the odd ones out there. Fu.san and Torun.san, who were high.ups, and Mousy looking, Kick.ass Tomiko Chan, as well as the huge, hulking Kiba.san, whose icy cool temperament made him the exact opposite of his namesake, all lacked surnames. He had discovered that his strongest suit was unquestionably not strategy. To his surprise, he was actually quite skilled at tactics, as long as they involved coming up with a new one after things had gone awry. His quick thinking had always been his strongest suit, but strategy was dull as hell. He had gotten his own mask, too. It had markings around the eyes, which were meant to resemble insect eyes, and was immaculately white like porcelain. Firefly was a dumb name for an ANBU, so he was still torqued. Unless the enemy ninja had some strange phobia, glowing beetles didn't usually frighten them the way tigers and boars did. However, the mask would remain in place, and to make matters worse, he had yet to discover Sai's codename. That bastard with the tight lips. In order to make fun of him, Naruto fervently hoped it was Bunny. Hibari Sensei touched him for a moment to make sure Kyuubi had healed him properly, and then she ordered, "Go back to your room to clean up and rest. You are to meet me at entrance A2 at 9, in civilian clothes." Naruto's face broke into a broad smile. He had a strategy. All was well with a plot to make Sai loose up and his distinctly good, moral plan. Naruto's missing friend was immediately recognized by others besides Sasuke and Sakura. One of the few people who understood how traumatic Naruto's early years had been, a gentle, kind-hearted, and courteous girl, had a crush on him the size of the Hokage monument, but she lacked the courage to approach him. Hyuga Hinata could not have failed to notice. She had spent a considerable amount of time surreptitiously following Naruto around. She certainly wasn't following him around. She followed him around, but she was only hiding because she was so incredibly weak and in pain, and it wasn't considered stalking when she had good intentions. Additionally, she could see through clothes and walls if she so desired, but she would never do so. It had been an accident, except for that one time. She had finally worked up the nerve to approach Naruto and had arrived at his apartment before she lost it. Trying to find the courage to knock on the door, she shifted her weight uneasily from one leg to the other. She had seen Naruto in a restroom, used her bloodline to check if he was inside, and used it as a convenient excuse to put things off. Fortunately, he had a white and blue towel around his waist. However, Hinata fainted as soon as she saw his strong arms, almost foxy gait, and tanned, muscular chest, which was still glistening with tiny drops of water. Still, it wasn't stalking. Hinata learned of Naruto's disappearance on the 4th day. Since his teammates should be aware, she chose to ask them since she was a smart, practical girl. She also had a cousin who thought highly of Naruto and would often go to absurd lengths once he made a decision. Naruto was the only person who had ever been able to talk him out of that resolve. A double oops. However, that's the price that evil megalomaniacs pay for their evilness. The bar was packed with noisy patrons, smoky, and somewhat odorous. After the sterile root headquarters, Naruto adored it. He was taking tiny, feminine sips from his glass while seated on the bar stool as Hibari Sensei had instructed. He had always found that jutsu and strolling were sufficient. He had no idea that deceiving ninja over an extended period of time required so much planning. He thought the drink looked feminine, so it was pink. You couldn't have it all, but it tasted dumb. A man in his 60s was wriggling his eyebrows at Naruto, asking, "What is a woman like you doing in a place like this?" Aside from his lack of tattoos and black, cropped hair, the man reminded him of Ero Sennin. "Having a free night while my dear husband is taking care of our 10-month-old baby," he explained. It was truly necessary to maintain a straight face. The pervert's eyes swept over his body and asked, "Cammy, what's a woman like you doing with a husband and a baby?" The man swallowed forcefully as Naruto pushed her shoulders back and sat up straighter, highlighting her large breasts. Since foxes were known to frequently assume a woman's form in folklore to play with men, Sai had hypothesized that Kyuubi was the real cause of his borderline obsession with disguising himself as a girl wearing scantily. Indeed, he had gotten to know Naruto that well in just 1 week. The way that breasts affected people's brains amused Naruto. The sex was too good to say no. This had an excellent explanation, actually. The terrible fact that Sai had only ever eaten instant ramen was the reason Naruto had chosen to take him to Ichiraku's. Both ramen and instant ramen existed, and from Naruto's perspective, the latter was a crime against ramen. Sai, with whom he had been befriending, had tried his best to ignore his antics, but that was nothing new. Naruto hadn't been concerned because they would all eventually crack. Additionally, the topic of conversation had inevitably shifted to ramen because Naruto was Naruto. Sai had shaken his head and not smiled. They had been traveling to the training room when they said, "Isn't all ramen basically the same? I know they pretend to make different flavors, but it all tastes the same to me." When Sai looked over, he saw that Naruto had stopped in the middle of the hallway and was no longer walking next to him. Unbeknownst to him, Naruto was permanently persuaded that there was a problem with the root. Growing ninja would consume the bliss. Come. Tangible that was real ramen, and only complete monsters would stop them. He continued to say Sai-kun, but he had already come to think of him as just Sai, much like the drama queen ninja, also known as Uchiha Sasuke. Sai was a companion. Only his cold, lifeless body could deprive any of his friends in such a way. That's why he had made the decision to smuggle Sai into Ichiraku's. He needed a cover story because he couldn't actually sneak him through the river entrance because Sai was too cruel. Abiding to catch him and deny Naruto his ramen. To do this, he had launched a vicious attack on Hibari Sensei, claiming that Sai needed some real world experience with subtlety because he was as subtle as a Rasengan to a face and that he would never be able to infiltrate anything if he had like social skills. Naruto had the maturity to acknowledge his own shortcomings. Since it was all true, Hibari Sensei had agreed and set up a root nin known only as Hyo to pose as a false informant that Sai would have to deal with while Naruto set up a diversion. The entire bar was aware that he was using all of his strength to distract. Following this, he would coerce Sai and Hibari Sensei into dining at Ichiraku's. The plan was ideal. It was clear that he was already becoming an expert at being subtle. The husky-voiced man said, "I bet I could give you better," and placed his hand on Naruto's thigh. He swatted it off. Over the general conversation, he said, "Sorry, wrong equipment for that," in a voice that he knew every man, every ninja, could hear. The man's eyes widened, and Naruto briefly contemplated having a heart attack. "At times I do bring a lady friend to home, though, when we have left Taiki-kun to my parents for the night. My husband so loves to watch it, all that naughty touching, you see?" Naruto said. The majority of the women were glaring at him as if he were a transgression of their gender, and every man in the bar was now staring at him, some more overtly than others. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Sai approach Hyo before stepping back. The mission has been accomplished. He got up as elegantly as he could. Naruto turned around and walked out of the bar after saying, "Talking of him, I guess a night out wasn't such a good idea after all. I miss him so." Before Hibari Sensei showed him all the suggestive ways women could walk, he had no idea that there were so many. In a shadowy alley, he met Sai and Hibari Sensei. He could almost think that this was an actual illegal meeting in Iwa because the sun was setting and the alley's darkness excited him. Well, that was distracting. Not exactly subtle, but then again, this particular practice mission wasn't really tailored to teach you much. It was more for Sai Kahai's benefit, and Sai Kahai, Hibari Sensei glanced back. "Your body language was good, but other than that you were in sore need of training. Your choice of conversation was insulting and your facial expressions not convincing. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Naruto-san. Both of you, expect a lot of this kind of training in the future." Naruto was fairly bouncing up and down. "Great, now to Ichiraku's," he said. Hibari Sensei raised one eyebrow, as cool as a block of ice, and asked, "Pardon?" In retrospect, Naruto understood that she had likely anticipated a harsher reprimand for his lack of tact, but he would improve the next time. "I'm hungry, and we have time, and ramen's good," Naruto said as if it were clear. Hibari Sensei said sharply, "We are returning to the HQ immediately." She turned around, indicating that the discussion was over. She couldn't help but flinch when Naruto grabbed her hand. Naruto pondered, what's wrong with her hands? Does she have a painful skin condition? Not in his opinion. Even though they got fairly rough during their sparring, Hibari Sensei never flinched. He was curious, and the urge to make things better was so intense that it nearly hurt, but he didn't want to do it in front of Sai, in a dimly lit alley where anyone could overhear them. In addition, he needed to get Sai to Ichiraku's, so for the time being, he couldn't ask the woman in charge any personal questions. Pretty please, Hibari. Sensei. Sai has never eaten any real ramen. It has been so long since I have, and I bet you could use some ramen too. Ramen makes you happy. Ramen can save your soul. Please, please, please. He looked like a puppy dog. This is beginning to sound like some kind of cult. Sai didn't request to be taken in. It's unlikely that Okubo Hibari ever requested a student, much less two. Danzo. Sama never inquired. Even though Naruto.kun hadn't requested to join, he was handling everything quite nicely. Sai's new roommate seemed to be immune to everything that should have made someone accustomed to the official side of the village feel confined, mistreated, and unhappy. Additionally, Naruto.kun exuded an odd sense of innocence, emotional purity, and tenacity in the face of severe punishment. It made him think of someone, but he was unable to identify who it was. He had to remember someone, even though he might not have wanted to. Naruto.kun assured Okubo. Senpai, you can be the second high priestess, he heard. He winked at the girl wearing a white apron, and she reciprocated by saying, Ayame. Chan is the first priestess. They appeared to be a sister and brother. Sai observed that ninja of any rank rarely had such a positive relationship with civilians. They were usually too frightening. However, a newborn kitten would not have been intimidated by Naruto. Life. Altering epiphanies don't always come from big, life-threatening, or the end of the world as we know it, situations. Naruto.kun looked expectantly at Sai.kun and asked enthusiastically, do you like the miso ramen? Sai.kun? It would have been like kicking a puppy to say no. It is good, Naruto.kun. It does taste different than the instant kind, he acknowledged. It was accurate. He didn't have to mention that he would never be appointed high priest of ramen, even though it was true. Sai momentarily hoped he would learn to mimic Naruto. Kun's smile as his face glowed like a bonfire in the yellow, cozy candlelight. Someone would undoubtedly trust him if he smiled like that. Have faith in him so he can later turn on them. He was destined to do that. He glanced at Naruto. Kun's smile, which was starting to fade beneath his mute gaze. Did treachery flourish behind it as well? He was uneasy about that thought, so he focused on the flavor of his ramen, the crisp bite of ginger, and the softer taste of miso and soy. He recalled a gentle smile and hair that resembled Naruto. Kun's. I have heard of your battle with Gaara.san and how you brought back Uchiha.san. How is it that you can beat someone in battle, go against their belief system, with Gaara.san when your village is at war with theirs, and have them come around? He asked. He didn't want to recall anything else. It wasn't going well, and it was an uphill battle. It's a gift? All he needed was a good kick and someone who understood. Naruto.kun had had ample opportunity to practically inhale 3 bowls, as Okubo Senpai forced them to depart after her bowl was finished. As usual, they checked back into headquarters, and Okubo Senpai sent them on their way, telling them that Naruto.san would be introduced to the process at a formal debriefing the following morning. She glared at him a little, and Naruto.kun smiled sheepishly while massaging his head. Sai pondered how little he actually understood about proper procedure. Then they went back to their room, Naruto.kun babbling about everything and nothing while dragging Sai along as if it were a place worth hurrying to. He had remained this way throughout their time together, whether Naruto.kun was tickling him or bleeding on the training room while still yelling at them to believe him that he would become proficient. However, Naruto.kun had lived up to the room quite a bit. Sai didn't know how or when he had obtained the posters, the toad-shaped lamp, the books, or the eyesore. Bright pillows all over the place. He had an odd reluctance to learn and put Naruto.kun in danger. Even though Naruto.kun had given him the Icha book that the bunny ANBU starred in, he was beaming maniacally. Of all the things he could have implied. After brushing their teeth and putting on their pajamas, Sai switched off the light. Both of them were already half asleep when Sai suddenly sat up, causing Naruto.kun to turn around in his bed and give him an odd look. You proposed that exercise solely so you could take me to that ramen bar, didn't you? He asked. Naturally, there were no windows in the room, and the faint blue flicker of the nightlight made it difficult for him to see Naruto-kun's face. He was itching to see the face of his new, unexpected friend, but he refused to move or give in to the urge. Naruto.kun replied, yeah, of course, as if it were the most natural response. His voice was cracking, which he didn't like, but he liked not knowing why people did what they did even less. Why did you do so? There was nothing in it for you and it was a small thing. Except for him, no one had ever done anything to make him happy, nobody. Naruto.kun stated, it wasn't small to you, with more insight than Sai would have preferred. Naruto.kun didn't know it himself, so how could he know that it wasn't small? Besides, you are one of my precious friends, like Sasuke, Baka and Sakura, Shan and Neji.kun and Gaara.kun and all my senseis and old man Hokage. One day I'm gonna be the Hokage so I can better protect you all. If you ever try to run away I'll drag you back like that idiot Sasuke and I'm feeding you cause you know nothing of having fun. When Sai was 10 years old, he committed his first murder and it didn't seem like anything worth talking about. A member of the Fire Daimyo's court who had advocated for lessening the village's support had been the target of his second murder. Danzo Sama had smuggled Sai into the man's quarters by using the fact that the man had also been a pederast interested in boys under the age of 15 as an irrelevant detail. Sai felt a great sense of satisfaction in killing the man based on the looks he gave him, even though nothing had happened. Later, the mission had made him sick, but it had not diminished his devotion to Danzo Sama in the least. Sai had been captured on his 7th assassination mission. He was aware that if Sai broke and still had the intelligence to request a paper and pen, Danzo Sama would not order a rescue but would simply alter his plans to avoid jeopardizing them. 2 days later, like the good tool he was, he had escaped himself and returned to the route, where he had been punished for not completing the mission. Although he had briefly thought about it, he hadn't broken back then or betrayed Danzo Sama. All anyone needs to know about Naruto's character is that, despite everything else, he was the one who broke Sai. It was an entirely unintentional incident, and he used 3 sentences and a bowl of ramen to do it. Sai was left feeling much happier, more content, and more irate as a result. And initially, largely joyful. His name was Shin. Sai broke, and for the first time since Shin's passing, he grinned honestly. Fortunately, Naruto had sharp eyes that could see it in the dark. Suborn Count 1 on day 9. The surveillance seal captured Okubo Hibari and Crane instructing Uzumaki in Naruto Kinjutsu. The day was lovely and warm. Sai, who was concealed in an underground military base, was unaware of that. After 10 minutes of cleaning his plate and drinking his coffee during their half-hour lunch break, Naruto.kun, being Naruto.kun, went back to their training room. Sai opened the door and started to approach his teammate, but he stopped in the middle of his stride to take in the scene. Check out the bright red and blue tatami mats that were rolled up next to the wall to escape their destructive ways. Gunpowder, hollow bamboo sticks, white porcelain shells, small glass and clay bottles, wooden boxes, inkwells, brushes, and blank notes were all arranged on a small table in preparation for the afternoon's lesson, which was about combining taijutsu with kyakujutsu, the art of explosives. Verify. Naruto is knitting while seated on a bench. Verify? Sai cast a suspicious glance at Naruto.kun and his knitting. He readily acknowledged that there were numerous useful applications for a scarf. It could be used to bandage wounds, tie up prisoners, and even keep someone warm in an emergency. If the shirt was long enough, it could also be tied around a person's waist, but it wasn't like the person who wore it worried about his neck first when the temperature dropped. However, the harsh reality was that pink was not a good color for a ninja. Putting orange aside, he didn't believe Naruto.kun would wear that. Excuse me, but what are you doing? And he prayed to any god who would hear from a murderer like him. Perhaps Janshin. That Naruto.kun would not attempt to coerce him into donning it. It made Naruto.kun twitch. How fascinating. Even though he occasionally yelled a lot, he never shied away from any of Sai's questions, even the ones that he seemed to already know the answers to and that people weren't supposed to ask. Sai was worried that he had damaged his friendship with Naruto.kun in some way the first time that had happened, but Naruto.kun pretended that nothing had ever gone wrong 5 minutes later. Sai felt uneasy. He was accustomed to anticipating how others would respond to him, so he would be in hot water if Naruto.kun was an example of the typical outsider. However, during Sai's missions, no one had ever behaved in such a manner as Naruto.kun. Although Naruto.kun didn't reject an answer this time either, he did droop his head slightly and laugh sheepishly while stroking his hair. Naruto.kun found enough humor in it to respond, even though it was embarrassing at the time. Knitting. Usually girls do it. This explanation explained the embarrassment, but it made even less sense now. Sai had to inquire, are you cultivating a more feminine reputation? Since Naruto Kun's Oroku no Jutsu was unknown. Haremu no Jutsu, too. Otter. Senpai, poor thing. Naruto.kun glared at him, promising a very painful and quick sparring session if he dared to laugh. What? It's for Sakura-chan, he said. Happy that Naruto.kun had told him the truth before he had a chance to say it, Sai confessed. I was going to say that pink is a very gay color. It would have been a mistake, he was sure. Although admitting embarrassing mistakes was supposed to relax people, Naruto. Kun's frown suggests that admitting he had thought so was just as bad. Sai let out an inward sigh. So many regulations. How did ninja and civilians who were not trained to have photographic memory remember everything? Anticipating an unholy tirade, he inquired, how are you going to send it to Sakura-san? Stupid, if not explicitly stated, was implied by the statement, by mail, of course. He pondered how the scarf would have been delivered to the post office by Naruto.kun. He pondered how he obtained the knitting needles and yarns. He pondered who had initially taught him to knit and concluded that it would be best for him to remain anonymous. At that moment, he saw a paper bag leaning against Naruto-kun's bench leg. He inquired, what's in that box? With a sigh, Naruto.kun placed his knitting on the bench next to him. His forehead was still covered with a wet towel from their previous training session. It seemed to Sai that he had somehow forgotten it existed. Tomiko-chan gave some homemade onigiri for me to eat. She's practicing her kunoichi skills. Which, according to all of the Icha series, did not imply seduction. The civilian women of hidden villages and the women outside had quite different expectations for women, acceptable gender roles, manners, freedoms, and entitlements. In the eyes of the village society, the kunoichi were no better than males with two X chromosomes. Therefore, a kunoichi who was sent out undercover and wasn't taught how to be a traditional woman wouldn't have been able to fool a 2-year-old for 2 full minutes. Aside from preparing hot mission rations, cooking was another aspect of being a woman. Sai walked warily toward the box. He was aware of Tomiko-san's culinary skills. He inquired, have you eaten them? 1. Naruto.kun admitted with a shudder. But I can't send them back. Sai concurred, of course not. He didn't know why, but Naruto seemed to know more about these things. With a grim determination, he picked up the bag and opened it. He was unaware that onigiri could smell like burnt vinegar or be so dark and sticky. He was fairly certain that onigiri was not supposed to be made with vinegar. Naruto remarked, greater love hath no man that they help their friends put up with maniac cooks. And Sai momentarily envied him for being able to bring up their friendship in such a casual and trustworthy way. He explained to his roommate, I came to tell you that we don't have the afternoon training today and Senpai will take over tomorrow. Hibari. Sensei has been assigned a 3 days mission with Senpai. It had only been 3 days. Danzo.san should know better by now. Some people are plain bad for each other. Was it too long? Sai pondered. Naruto.kun questioned, why? Don't they like each other? At that moment, Sai realized he would need to remove Naruto.kun from the route. He had known it all along, of course, but that innocuous question only served to emphasize how Sai wanted to keep things that way and how Naruto.kun still didn't realize how badly he had been duped. In a sense, I was almost saving myself. It was all about trust. He would never get his money back if he risked his life for Naruto. That is not the issue. Hibari, Senpai and Senpai are in as friendly terms with each other as Rutanin ever are. It's simply that Hibari, Senpai has issues, Senpai has similar issues, and when they spend prolonged time together they tend to set each other off. The human mind was an odd creature. Senpai had carried out numerous missions, such as spinach yogurt or Operation 137B, without blinking, but they would untangle each other's control. Hibari, Senpai could be sent to Iwa on a mission and it wouldn't damage her armor. At least Senpai just got maudlin. There would be an episode of Hibari, Senpai. Sai knew that was impossible, despite Danzo-san's pride in producing kunoichi and shinobi without emotion. They weren't completely insane enough to not have feelings, but he could make them ignore them, deny they ever existed in the first place, and completely destroy their ability to recognize and deal with them. Sai assured Naruto, we have to put the equipment away, but I'm going to quiz you. Naruto moaned. Wasn't Naruto meant to be happy when he focused on his training? His responses were peculiar and erratic. Why do we need to learn to make bombs when we can make explosive tags, and how are those equipment used? Asked the man. Naruto rolled his eyes and explained, because the chakra infused into the notes can be detected, so bombs are stealthier. Wooden boxes are used more to attack castles or fortifications, shells are used for smoke bombs, bamboo is used for ambushes along roadways, bottles are used in the city to divert people, and explosions rock. The bigger the better. Naruto was now joyful once more, grinning his dazzling smile and pumped his fist up and down with excitement. Explosions are art. Sai argued, disagreeing with that statement. He understood the difference between wanton destruction and true art. Not religion? Religions were not meant to be logical figures. That's reserved for ramen. It was a lovely day with lots of golden sunlight and warmth. A light wind blew in from the open window, carrying the energizing aroma of witch hazel and juniper trees from the garden outside the Hokage tower. Sarutobi Hiruzen enjoyed reading Icha and relaxing on this type of day, but the man in front of him was like a storm cloud. Kakashi would not allow it. Before he remembered Naruto, he was going to make Sarutobi's life completely miserable. Those who abandon their mission are trash, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash. Why can't you already extract him? By now Naruto should have proved, and the seal recorded, the existence of Root and Danzo. Sans involvement. Please pinpoint his seal and end this madness. It had been a day since Hitaki Kakashi had stopped arguing Naruto's case. He had only just returned from a week-long mission sent by the Sandaime Hokage, and that was undoubtedly the reason. Sandaime avoided Kakashi's gaze but spoke in a long, suffering tone, saying, "The latter is not guaranteed, but still, if that was all I wanted he would be extracted as we speak. I do not enjoy the thought of Naruto-kun in Root." It all came down to the question, what more do you want? Naruto's life was already tough enough. Why would it be worth causing him any more trauma? If all I wanted was to nail Danzo-san, what we have now would likely be enough, but there are also the council members who have known and looked the other way to consider. They are guilty of aiding and abetting, but aiding and abetting what exactly? They have political power. If all we can prosecute them for is hiding Root's existence, the sentence can hardly be more than dishonorable discharge from their position, as we don't want to cause a civil war. If we can prosecute them for hiding kidnappings, unauthorized assassinations and regular breaking of the village's constitutional law and treaties with foreign villages, that is, politics. Sandaime was looking at a burn mark next to a small orange book on his desk for an unknown reason. The fact that Kakashi was happy to have broken the sacred moment of reading quality pornography was indicative of his mood. The worst part was that, despite his disagreement, he could understand Sandaime's motivation. In a perfect world, they would be able to confiscate at least some of Root's documents, but the Root Nin were known to be highly competent and were undoubtedly ordered to destroy all evidence in the event that they were besieged. He had to operate under the presumption that everything that Naruto's surveillance seal captured would be concrete proof. It wasn't that he wouldn't be pleased to see Sandaime's betraying teammates and Danzo's authoritarian flunkies, Mitokado Homura and the harpy Utatane Kaharu, taken out and given their just desserts, ideally with a few others. So, the worse things are for Naruto the better they are for you. But Naruto was at the center of this. The other council troublemakers should lose face and the majority of their unofficial power if the snake's head is removed. That would suffice. It was for the reason that, if we don't do this right now we only have to do it again later, however. That wasn't no, like all council members, Danzo had a lovely, traditional home. It featured a large garden with old trees and a fountain where he kept goldfish, and it had a nice, light atmosphere. A bamboo fence with a square weave was present. While the kitchen, bathroom, and toilet are attached to the side of the house as extensions, there was only one ima, or living room, under the roof. The bathroom features a deep, aesthetically pleasing bathtub that is set into the floor, wooden and paper sliding doors, and an antique hearth. However, it was all a show. 2 layers of bamboo were separated by a metal fence that could be electrified. Seals were used to reinforce the paper and wood, and a heater was located beneath the hearth. Danzo only valued tradition when it did not interfere with practicality. The master of the house had 2 folders on his lap while drinking tea on a porch. Naruto was not at all satisfied with the thicker one, which was about his training. The Jinchuriki wasn't suited to be a ninja, even though he was already a pretty skilled fighter. Even a minor conflict and the betrayal of his closest friend couldn't erase Naruto's sense of innocence. It was a kind of soul innocence that clung to him like a foul odor rather than the innocence of someone who had no blood on their hands. Danzo couldn't and really didn't want to believe in souls. The Hokage would allow Naruto to kill a child if he refused a mission to do so. Fortunately, the Hokage was no longer in charge of this. However, it would be better to guide the boy gradually. It would be a tragic waste of resources if he fled and had to be found and killed. The thinner folder contained information about the 7 tailed horned beetles Jinchuriki and Fu, a kunoichi from Takigakure. She was about Naruto's age and was comparatively stable, but there was some indication that she had bipolar disorder, as evidenced by her happy, active times interspersed with depressive ones. The green-haired girl in the photo who grinned at him would be ideal for removing Naruto's naive innocence that is preventing him from progressing. All of Konoha's shinobi and kunoichi were required to obey orders, put the mission before themselves and their allies, and be prepared to use any means necessary, only to ensure that the village would remain resilient and safe from outside threats. Even after the Chunin exam siege demonstrated Danzo's correctness, the Hokage persisted in favoring and harming the ninja. This would be the initiation for Uzumaki Naruto, who would become a true member of Root, to kill a fellow Jinchuriki who did not deserve to be killed for Konoha's honor and safety. In Naruto's opinion, combining Kyakujutsu and Taijutsu had been a huge success. He was unaware that explosions could occur in those hues. Their training room was transformed into a laboratory, complete with visors, long, thick gloves that could withstand fire, and a smoky blue blast protection sheet made of a smooth, plastic-like substance. For obvious reasons, the explosions had not been very powerful, and Naruto was eager to test them out in the field. Lessons in drawing were much less enjoyable. The image he had created of Hibari sensei caught his attention. Enough. Reaching for his glass of iced tea, he dropped the pen on the desk. The temperature was lukewarm. He told Sai, who was sitting cross-legged on his bed with a book in his hand, "I still prefer explosive tags because they are easier to use, even though bombs were fun to make." Their room had been split into two sections when he had started remodeling it. Sai's tidy, clinical, melancholy side and his chaotic, energetic side. Many of his belongings, including his toad lamp and a few pillows, had already drifted to Sai's area. One, bright orange and featuring an image of a bowl of ramen, was lying beside Sai's leg. Although Sai didn't respond to his statement, he did put the book down after carefully marking the page and gazed at Naruto with an uncomfortable level of intensity. He smiled at Sai, never wanting to show his discomfort. People were depending on his strength. Hokages were not uncomfortable, and he would one day be one. According to one of my books, friendship is mutually company operative and supportive behavior between two or more people. In this sense, the term connotes a relationship which involves mutual knowledge, esteem, affection, and respect along with a degree of rendering service to friends in times of need or crisis. Sai stated, completely off topic. Fortunately, he was not grinning because he still made a lot of mistakes. Sure, he replied. He found it hard to understand why his friend was posing as a dictionary. Friends will welcome each other's company and exhibit loyalty towards each other, often to the point of altruism. Yet for some, the practical execution of friendship is little more than the trust that someone will not harm them. Aha! He felt insecure. The quality of life in the Root must have been awful. Friends liked each other, looked out for each other when evil Nukanen tried to impersonate them, kicked each other's asses when they deserved it, and fed each other. Sounds like all kinds of fancy explanation. It's the most simple thing in the world. Furthermore, friends never, ever deserted or betrayed one another. Some people required more practice than others. Naruto considered Sasuke. However, a genuine friend would also be patient, pursue their foolish teammate, and offer to assist them in murdering their brother. That is, if they intended to murder their brother, it would just be eerie if they didn't. Using the same tone of voice as when he had previously asked Naruto if he preferred miso ramen or beef ramen and whether he had ever fantasized about having sex with Tsunade. Sama, Sai said, bear with me. I am only now getting reacquainted with the concept. You seem to love quite easily, but how can I be sure you won't fall out of love? I don't, Naruto stated unequivocally. I don't know how people do. I have never stopped loving anyone once I loved them first. In a way, talking about love went against the grain, and Naruto's tone was strained. As a 13-year-old boy, he found it nearly painful to swallow the words and preserve his dignity when he confessed his love for someone, even in a non-romantic, manly, friendly manner. Perhaps it was even because it was love and friendship without a name. Despite their many similarities, Sai was not Sasuke. That was the case with Sasuke. He needed to be aware of this and refrain from assisting a friend who was in greater pain than committing suicide out of self-respect. The fact that Sai didn't notice was somewhat helpful. Here it is, he scowled and said. He was receiving drawing lessons from Sai, and they were going. Despite lacking any artistic talent, Naruto was able to conceal a picture of a building layout inside a toad, and his image of Hibari Sensei was at least recognizable. The retrieval of Uchiha Sasuke, alive and unharmed even after he put an A-class lightning jutsu through your chest vouches for the validity of that statement. I reap the benefits of your mental disorder, Sai said while staring at the image. He was a perfectionist when it came to art. Are you saying I am crazy? Because Naruto would not tolerate that, friend or not. Sanity and insanity are a matter of social norms. In every society there is widely accepted definition for mentally normal. When one differs from it enough, one way or another, one can be classified as abnormal. Even if it is beneficial for the society as a whole, as in your case, since your abnormal incapacity to fall out of love has most likely protected this village from being burned to the ground. Sai's tone was conciliatory. That was a compliment, in a way. Perhaps, it was quite difficult to identify Sai's voice. He yelled, "Then you were crazy too," because, even if it was a compliment, he wouldn't tolerate Sai's insanity and wouldn't confront him if he did, even though he wasn't. But was Sai, if he wasn't? Naruto scowled. He was perplexed. Sai's smile was that annoying fake one, but there was something behind it, something Naruto hadn't learned to read despite his Sasuke. Related practice. I know. Similar personalities are supposed to be good for the strength of the friendship also, so it all works out. Except for the one occasion when Naruto dyed Kakashi Sensei's hair pink without the man noticing, the last angsty Uchiha never smiled. You were mental in your books too. The book, except for jutsu, reading books never produced anything positive. What is the craziest jutsu you have ever done? Asked the man. When Naruto had half given up hope, Sai's face twitched, and that was an honest to. Kami snort, following a blank moment of bemusement. Still a snort, but without sound. When we made tracks with Shin, Sai replied, his face displaying the melancholy, tender emotion that Naruto was all too familiar with. He was getting really expressive. Or perhaps not. We would use Earth-type jutsu to create fake tracks, to make it look as if something weird had been walking down the road. I did monkey tracks and Shin did goats. Naruto thought that was a brilliant idea. Distracting the enemy Nin in this way, along with all the amusing footprints he could leave behind, would be awesome. He let out a loud laugh. I would make giant lizards. You have got to teach that to me. Just imagine what kind of pranks that could be used for. Even better than the pink hair dye. It was a blast. Damn it, it was enjoyable, but Sai wasn't giggling. He appeared blank once more, and Naruto questioned whether he had a split personality or something because such mood swings weren't typical. The Sai in Naruto's head now wore a maternity dress, unless you were pregnant. And ballet flats designed to accommodate swollen feet during pregnancy. Fantastic. Sai struck his tongue out when he said, Naruto.kun. There is something you should know. Naruto initially believed he was insulting him, but when he saw that Sai's had a blocky hexagram written on it, his irate reply died on his tongue. Additionally, Sai explained to him how the wearer of this cursed seal would become completely paralyzed, losing the ability to move or speak, whenever they discussed anything pertaining to Danzo with someone outside of the root. Suborn Count 1 on day 13. The surveillance seal captured the following. Non-registered root operative Fu, Okubo Hibari, and ANBU operative Crane were sent to a mission that was not authorized by the mission office. Danzo's creation and frequent use of a cursed seal violates Konohagakure no Sato, a constitutional law. Naruto would never say it that way and was unaware of it, but his friendship with Sasuke was actually rather unhealthy. It was a strange combination of taking things at face value, which hurt, and unfair rivalry. Although he was actively being friendly, Sai was just as socially retarded as Sasuke. He used his trademark blank expression when Sasuke scowled, continued to refuse to reveal the identity of his mask, and had recently started making remarks about his dick. Along with the extremes, he was trying to make the middle ground work. His initial attempts weren't always successful, and establishing friendships through books frequently produced amusing outcomes, but he was trying his hardest, and it helped Naruto feel more at ease. As if he could, in a metaphorical sense, let go of Sai and not simply flee. He wasn't going to give Sai a pass for calling him dickless, though. He was aware that Sai would act in public if he did the next thing. Okay. Sai tampered with his head, he would then tamper with Sai's. There are various schools of the knitting ninja, said Naruto. Sai scowled as he examined his 2 knitting needles and baby blue yarn. The lace knitters of Suna incorporate different kinds of baubles, sequins, and beads in their work and sell it to the daimyo, while the knitters of Konoha frequently use cable knitting to make the product denser and less elastic. When you secure the previous stitch in a wale, the next stitch can pass through the previous loop from below or above. If it's the former, it's as a knit stitch. If it's the latter, it's a purl stitch, he said. Sai scowled as a small suspicion began to grow. Naruto.kun, you are serious about this? Asked he. Naruto grinned. Naruto joyfully commanded, of course I am. Listen to Naruto Sensei and keep on working on those socks for me. Being Naruto was fun because everyone believed he was too obvious to play with their minds. However, beneath that joy, he was looking nervously at the door. They were waiting for Hibari Sensei in the training room after she returned from her mission. Despite his best efforts to hide it, Naruto was quite concerned about his sensei. When he saw Sandaime standing against Orochimaru and realized that the old man might lose, or when they had dragged a nearly paralyzed Kakashi Sensei to Tazuna Baka's house, the word episode made his stomach turn. He wasn't sure what Sai had meant by that. He did not want his newest responsible adult to have a mental breakdown, nor did he like Kakashi Sensei being paralyzed or the Sandaime falling. He asked, when do you think she will come? And then, with a thump, the door slid open, allowing Hibari Sensei to enter as usual. Naruto sighed in relief as she appeared severe but not angry. Naturally, she was fine. She nodded in greeting, Naruto.san, Sai, Kahai, and paused half a room away. Her body language was perfectly relaxed as she left the room, saying, this day's lesson has been cancelled. Please return to your quarters and no not leave without a permission from a superior officer. Naruto looked at Sai uncertainly. He questioned, she isn't okay, is she? Nobody should have been so skilled at pretending to be someone they weren't. If people didn't demonstrate that they needed assistance, how was he to know when to provide it? The point was not that he knew now, of course. Sai responded, I believe we should obey her, and before Naruto could respond, the room shook with a loud boom. Anger echoed through the corridor loud enough to be heard through the heavy door, and Naruto had to jump quickly to regain his footing as the cement floor shook. He growled, like fuck we will. Nobody gets left behind. He saw Sai toss the yarn and needles to the ground as he turned to chase after Hibari Sensei. When they attempted to circle after Hibari Sensei, the corridor was blocked by other rude operatives without masks, who appeared to be a mix of irritated and showing a small, unnoticed glint of sympathy. The explosion in the left had blocked the corridor. Just for being himself and being there and putting up with him and Hibari Sensei, Naruto could have kissed Sai. You know, Sai whispered as he physically pulled Naruto away from the nin obstructing their path, we are still small enough that we should fit into the vents. That was more than Naruto had anticipated. Putting offensive remarks about his dick aside, he needed assistance now, and Sai was a huge help. Even though you have all the experience of a rock that was dropped on its head as a baby, I adore you. Absolutely. Sai, thank you? He obviously didn't comprehend yet, but few people recognized Uzumaki Naruto's greatness. They then set out to save Hibari Sensei from Iryo nins who were brandishing blowpipes. They were just barely big enough to fit the vents. The fit was snug, particularly around the shoulders. Naruto trusted his sense of smell, even though it was so dark that Kyuubi's sight was hardly useful at all and the vents were so confusing. One of the scents that made Naruto crawl blindly towards it was that of Hibari and her favorite sword oil and pain. Other scents were earthy, heavy, and distinct. She was pacing like an animal in a cage when Naruto first saw her. She was so preoccupied that she didn't even realize he was watching her from between the dusty metal sheets. He kicked the grating down and descended to what turned out to be someone's, Hibari Sense's, living quarters, with Sai, a dependable, supporting presence at his back, a backup. When Hibari Sensei saw who they were, he drew his sword, turned around with a single, abrupt motion, and growled at them. Didn't I tell you to stay away? She said, pointing with her blade to her door, which was barred by small strips of white paper with red and black seals on them. Those who abandon their teammates are worse than trash. We would never, said Naruto. Although Sai was trembling, she let him speak. So you care for me, Hibari? Sensei asked in a sour and blatantly cruel tone. With a loud, metallic clanking, she dropped her double-edged, tipless Tonto sword to the ground. Then, with jerky, furious movements, she snatched off her left glove, then her right. Naruto felt his own body react, bracing himself, as every muscle in her body ached in a way that shouted barely contained violence. Hibari Sensei, however, only raised one hand and pushed it against Naruto's face. The hand appeared entirely normal. There were no scars, no skin diseases, nothing. Because of the glove that had shielded it, it appeared much softer than the hands of most kunoichi. When the palm suddenly opened, he had already opened his mouth to ask. Naruto blurted out, is that connected to your stomach? The skin simply parted to show white teeth, which are perfectly normal human teeth, and a long, pink tongue that was moist with saliva. There were no actual lips. Naruto could see what appeared to be a throat through the wide opening of the mouth on her palm. Or rather, the mouth in her palm. But it was actually a dark cavity inside her wrist. On Naruto's mind, the bird was flying in. In addition, the ANBU mask instantly brought to mind a woman wearing a cat mask who had once told him that while giving him mashed, sweet, yellow food. He had always questioned why wearing ANBU masks made him feel somewhat at home. In a sense, it was incorrect, misplaced, and deformed, but Naruto brutally crushed that emotion. Since Naruto had no right to feel disgusted in Hibari. Sensei pretended to think it was something repulsive. Nobody should be ashamed of themselves. Beneath the logic, the child inside of him was squealing in complete awe. She said in a low, adamant voice, "Okubo is my mother's name. If I went by my father's name I would be Mori Hibari," clearly anticipating his response. As the tongue licked his cheek, Naruto pondered the idea that the Mori might be related to Anko-san in some way. "Aha!" he replied. She tightened her jaw. He heard it, but he could not see it. She then let her arm fall to her side. Holding it to his face must have started to seem a little goofy to her. On both of her palms, however, there were tiny fissures that appeared as though she was breathing through them. The mouth didn't really close again. Since Hibari Sensei had not slapped him for it the previous time, he inquired, "Are those connected to your lungs?" She shrugged and gestured vaguely with her right hand, saying, "The Mori are a famous Keke Genkai clan from Iwagakure. This is their Keke Genkai, called Magikuchi." She asked, using her palm tongue, "Aptly named, isn't it?" He said, "Cool," and it was, despite the fact that it was also really eerie. Frogs, insects that lay their eggs inside other living things, and the ability to fart your village anthem are all things that boys find cool, whether they are shinobi or not. The same applied to mouths on palms. What does it do? Can you just bite your enemy and hit them at the same time, or does it do some cool jutsu? Hibari Sensei exclaimed, "This is Iwa Keke Genkai." Halfway through the sentence, her voice broke. Now that she was stomping her feet fairly a lot, Naruto's mind was spinning from the emotional outburst. Despite her anger, Hibari Sensei never lost her composure. Well, not now, apparently. Although he was unaware of Hibari Sensei's issue, he could see that it was significant and that time was running out. There would be no benefit to anyone getting short on tranquilizer. So who cares where it is from? "Good thing for us you defected cause you are wicked good kunoichi," he stated. Few people in the world were as good as Tsunade. Bachan, but Hibari Sensei wasn't. She continued to rock. Her hands were balled into fists, and she was just a word away from attacking him, but it didn't matter because Naruto now understood. "I did not defect. My mother was in a relationship with a man who later turned out to be an Iwa spy, and he ran away and left me dealing with this," she said. From the corner of his eye, he noticed that Sai was gesturing at the door and pointing to the vents, instructing him to ascend again. There's no reason to put them both in danger. Sai shook his head after glancing at the vent and then Naruto. Naruto wasn't sure whether he was happy or angry, and he wasn't going to go, but there wasn't time to argue with Sai right now. Because Naruto valued women, he said, "He left your mother? What a bastard. I hope your mother kicked his ass so hard he could taste his own shit." Instead, he had learned early on from Sakura, Shan and Tsunade. Bachan what too many men had never learned. Men and women did not exist. People were present. He had one, damn it, while some of them had dicks and others had lovely, soft breasts. Breasts only affected men's brains, so it didn't really matter if you weren't having sex at the time. And the idea was that everyone needed to be treated with the same respect or else. That women would be in trouble while men got away with such things wasn't fair. She said, "My Keke Genkai is from Iwa," very slowly, as if she were trying to explain it to a slow-witted person. To be honest, Naruto didn't see what more she had said that he needed to comprehend. Naruto sincerely hoped so, but he had his doubts. "So, your father was a real bastard and a spy from Iwa. But at least you got cool abilities out of it? Sucks to be them. Maybe they will think twice next time." Until someone kicked the living daylights out of them, idiots remained idiots. "I have Iwa Keke Genkai in Konoha. My life is in ruins and it's not my fault. I hate that man. If I ever find out who it was, exactly, I will kill him." Her tone increased by at least an octave. "Whoa, how come your life is ruined? I have Kyuubi sealed into me in Konoha and my life isn't, so for sure yours isn't either. But if you want to kill him, I'm all for it. People who leave women pregnant and run are scum." It was a good question, and Naruto was bothered by it. And me saying I will kill my father does not bother you in the least? Killing your own father was a heinous act on many levels, and Naruto was at a loss to explain why it felt so wrong. It was everything. It was simply incorrect. He was able to comprehend people, though, and he knew that even if Hibari Sensei managed to locate her father, she wouldn't actually do it. She was just saying this to cheer herself up. How people lied to themselves was a mystery to Naruto. They knew all the time anyhow, so it didn't make sense. They should have, at the very least. However, they continued to lie, and he could comply if doing so improved the situation. He didn't mind, but Sasuke had a very good reason for wanting to kill his brother. Sasuke wants to kill his brother, it happens. He watched her as Hibari glanced at him. Naruto lunged, threw his arms around her shoulders, and clung to her like a squid because the silence was so overwhelming and they were running out of time. She also started crying. 4 sobs that shook her body so violently that something tiny and moist fell to Naruto's cheek and his teeth rattled. Then Naruto fell with Hibari Sensei as she went limp and dropped to her knees. Naruto raised his gaze from her black hakama to her nearly black, gleaming, moist, and hopeful eyes. "Do you swear?" inquired Hibari Sensei. Naruto took her hands and nodded. Now that their mouths were closed, they felt like regular hands. Awkwardly, she responded to his embrace, "I swear, you are gonna be alright." The pursuers then stormed into the room. The men and a woman wearing masks and full ANBU regalia froze for a moment when they saw Naruto in Hibari's unquestionably lethal arms, giving her enough time to open her mouth. Sai turned to face them and stepped back, his expression torn. She said simply, "I yield," and dropped her arms. She was once again in control of herself. Her face was calm and her eyes were dry. Even through the masks, Naruto was able to see white, perpetually smiling animal smiles for a brief moment. The ANBU then moved smoothly, restringing Hibari Sensei, who, despite having her arms twisted behind her back, appeared oddly happy. When Naruto complained, Hibari Sensei reassured him that everything would be fine. Sai grinned and said it looked great, and the looks that followed were like fish cakes on top of the ramen. As they led Hibari Sensei out, Naruto said, "So, with a sly smile, are those connected to your stomach?" Everyone, including Sai, stiffened, but Hibari Sensei grinned. Her cheeks were streaked with tears, and her eyes were puffy and red, but it was a lovely smile. "Wouldn't you like to know? On the 15th day following Naruto's capture by the forces of evil, Hitaki Kakashi realized that his attempts to guilt-trip the Hokage were clearly failing. The man wasn't moving an inch, despite the fact that he twitched every time he entered his office and had last glanced longingly out the window. What then was a Jonin supposed to do? Naturally, call in reinforcements. Kakashi appeared to be reading his most recent Icha violence while sipping iced tea under a pale green awning, but a perceptive observer could have noticed that he wasn't flipping through any pages. Obviously, it would have to be someone who loved Naruto. It could only be beneficial to have someone fairly important who has the guts to intimidate the Hokage. Amino Iruka was concerned, but since he was merely a chunin, he wouldn't pay attention to the academy teacher if Sarutobi-san wasn't listening to Kakashi. Any of the clan leaders could be furious about this, but they wouldn't because they didn't appear to be angry with Naruto anymore, unless he told them the truth about his student. While that might be beneficial in the short term, it would have major long-term repercussions, including him being court-martialed for disclosing an S-class secret. If Naruto explained to the other council members why he was in the route, they would be more than happy to remember him, but that would negate the point of nailing them. When he heard a wolf whistle, Kakashi instinctively turned his head, having spent years building his reputation as a pervert. His eyes, both visible and hidden beneath his hitte widened. Hazel brown eyes that sparkled with warning of the famous finger flick of doom, a violet diamond tattooed on her forehead between them. Long, shapely legs that were exposed by the short skirt, very generous assets, and an even more generous neckline. Her pale, golden hair reflected the brilliant light of the sun. She moved with the elegance of a large, dangerous cat or a very affluent geisha. The final member of the Senju clan, Senju Tsunade, was a student of Sarutobi Hiruzen and the new head Irio.nin of the Konoha Hospital. A very dangerous woman who had only come back for Naruto's sake and who genuinely disliked the fact that ninja were seen as disposable, even in a relatively laid-back village like Konoha. With a grin that sent chills down the spines of many respected Iwa Anbu, Kakashi strode over to the woman. "Has anyone ever told you that you are perfection incarnate?" asked the man. Tsunade Sama raised her hand, pressing her thumb against her forefinger, and slowly turned her head in a deceptive manner. She fairly purred, "Hitaki Kakashi-san," and he would have greatly appreciated it if things had gone a little differently. Tsunade. Sama lowered her hand a few inches and narrowed those bright eyes, saying, "It's nothing perverted. This is about Naruto. He needs your help now." Although he appeared cool and collected on the outside, thanks to Guy.san for that, his inner self was bouncing up and down with joy. Danzo was staring at the boy sitting across from him, still wearing that damned orange jumpsuit, with mountains of papers piled on his desk acting as a wall between them. Furthermore, he felt uneasy that some sort of barrier was required. He chose to interpret the boy's fidgeting, which may have been boredom, as nervousness the last time he had spoken to Uzumaki Naruto. Uzumaki was now raising his head, and Danzo was unnerved by the way his eyes resembled the late Namikaze Minato. In addition to being undignified and somewhat ridiculous with his obsessions, the Yondaime Hokage had been a man who could move mountains if he felt the need. It seemed that he had inherited more traits from his father than Danzo had realized. "I offer my congratulations for your show of understanding of human mind. Have you considered specializing in interrogation?" he mildly inquired. Sabaku no Gara and Uchiha.san may have been coincidences and flukes, respectively, but they have already formed a pattern 3 times. How someone so direct and annoying could be so skilled at manipulation was strange. Unfortunately, this put Hibari.san at risk. "No, I have not, and your people skills suck. These people need some joy in their lives. Scratch that, they need a life. And that cursed seal of yours is plain evil. What are you anyway, Orochimaru? Wannabe? Naruto?" San's voice was harsh and irritating. It was unacceptable that such a young, naive voice would question him since his voice had not yet broken the first time. Danzo was tempted to tear off the bandages and remind the cocky, unruly weapon of its proper place, but instead he held on to the edge of his desk until his knuckles were white and sharp. He could feel the burning in his eye beneath the bandages. Danzo bemoaned the fact that half of the 4 Hokages had been kind-hearted tree huggers. "Do not compare me to that Nukanen. I am a loyal servant of Konoha and all I do is for the protection of its people, even when naive idiots like you refuse to acknowledge this." But before he made the grave mistake of naming Namikaze Minato his follower, the professor had been a good Hokage. Since then, the man had not been himself. Many things could be attributed to that line. Naruto.kun objected, his arguments reverting to academy level. "You think you can protect people by hurting them? I wouldn't agree with you about sky being blue if you said so," Kon said. Had he not been so perplexed, Danzo would have felt vindicated. "What would you call it then?" The small ingrate would most likely say, "green." Or not. Periwinkle. Even Danzo, who was not particularly artistic or inclined to flaunt his stylish attire, was aware of what periwinkle was. "Take that," he thought smugly. 1. Periwinkle is a shade of blue, so in effect you are agreeing with me. 2. It isn't even the shade of sky. Statistically, the sky is more often periwinkle than light blue. Believe it, Naruto.kun, however, would not accept his convincing claims. Furthermore, the sky was never periwinkle in his opinion. This conversation has veered wildly out of control. You have been given an S-class mission at Takigakure. Your team will consist of operatives Fu, Sai and Tomiko. The nature of this mission will be revealed to you once you reach Takigakure's borders. You leave immediately and please, remember to take your mask with you. You need to comply with utmost secrecy. Akatsuki agent Hoshigaki Kisame has been detected in the vicinity of your target, the Jinchuriki of the 7-tailed horned beetle. He will whip Naruto when the rude child returned from his assignment. If it didn't stop him from leaving and give him a little peace, he would have the whelp now. He would simply give Fu a briefing and end the day. For a brief moment, Naruto was preoccupied with the absurdity of a 7-tailed giant beetle, but he maintained his composure. Itachi would be where Kisame was, and this unidentified Jinchuriki most likely needed his assistance. As Danzo's treatment of these people had to be illegal, he and Sai could also shield him or her from Danzo's schemes before he went to speak with the elderly man. Though he was unaware of it, Naruto was inseparable from Namikaze Minato. His coloring, stubbornness, love of ramen, preference for redheads if pink is considered red, charisma, and tendency to make the impossible possible were all traits that his father had instilled in his child. Danzo gritted his teeth as he watched the young genin march out of his office, slamming the door shut as he did so. Naruto.san said, "I'm going," as if it were his own decision. He promised himself peace for a few weeks, then, whipping. When Fu had turned away, Sai had been able to pull Okubo Hibari away in a tiny utility closet. Had he known, Jiraiya of the Sannin would have been thrilled. "We have to do something about this." Naruto-kun isn't cut out for this, Sai stated. With a somber nod, Okubo Hibari turned her head in the direction of the Hokage Tower, which he could see through the ground, ceiling, and buildings like a hyuga. She knew she wouldn't like this plan, so she said, "You have his back on this mission. I will take care of things at this end." Still, she was carrying it out. Poor Hokage, and poor Danzo. An interesting afternoon was in store. Suborn Count 2 on day 15. A Genin Jinchuriki sent by Danzo to an unapproved S-class mission of unknown but questionable nature to a non-hostile village, despite the detection of at least one Akatsuki Nukenin close to its borders, was captured on camera by the surveillance seal. Ninjas are always required to finish their missions. Sakura was a woman on a mission, and this was the most crucial ninja rule. The one with the footnote about not deserting your comrades. Her substitute is Hyuga Hinata. The goal of her mission was to discover the whereabouts of Naruto, a loud idiot who had no business worrying her in this way. Since she had recently started to feel bad about the way she kept ignoring him and giving Sasuke-kun doe eyes, Sakura had also started quietly urging Hinata-chan to tell Naruto-san about her feelings. However, she couldn't love Naruto in that way, so there wasn't much she could do, and it would be much simpler if Naruto-san showed interest in Hinata-chan instead. She was a great catch because she was attractive, sophisticated, and wealthy. She was also the most deserving of Naruto-san because she had been in love with him for as long as Sakura had been in love with her Sasuke-kun. Sakura wouldn't have to be concerned about how she would treat Naruto-san. She was a decent young lady. Perhaps Sakura could start referring to him as Naruto-kun without anyone mistaking him if Naruto fell in love with her. She had always been a lonely girl, and she would feel even more like friends after she and Ino broke up. They were sitting at Ichiraku on day 10 AD, after disappearance, ostensibly eating shrimp ramen while, in reality, deftly gathering information. It was not as difficult as I had thought. Tuchi-san told them all too cheerfully. He was here just yesterday night, his white teeth gleaming in the sunlight in a way that unnervingly made Sakura think of a certain Maida guy. I had been rather worried, since he usually tells us when he is leaving the village on a mission, too. He was with this beautiful lady with the Hide and a shinobi his age who looked so much like Uchiha Sasuke they might have been twins. Sakura blasted the amiable elderly man like the interrogation department, asking, "How did Naruto look like? What were their names? Did he tell where he was going to?" She vaguely saw that Tuchi-san was starting to appear both surprised by her intensity and a little alarmed, but she persisted until she had gotten as much information as she possibly could from him. Naruto-san had stated that he was kind of tied up with his new secret mission, and the attractive woman named Hibari had appeared hurt by this remark. The woman had been Hibari Sensei, and the Sasuke impersonator had been Sai-kun. As far as Tuchi-san could tell, Naruto-san had appeared to be in good health and content. Sakura also received a good description of Sai and Hibari. They hurriedly paid their bill and left after Sakura made the ramen chef promise to tell her if he saw Nato again. Hinata took Sakura's hand and muttered, "I don't like this. Why wouldn't Naruto-kun come meet us if he was in Konoha? He is always so considerate to his friends." Sakura nodded, staring into those large, pale eyes with such intensity that she nearly bumped into a street lamp. Only Hinata-chan's swift grab prevented her from looking foolish due to her lack of situation awareness. More than that, who is that Sai? The woman could just be some Jonin we haven't met yet, but I know all boys our age bracket and there is no Sasuke. Looking or otherwise. It wasn't intentional, but Sasuke was being remarkably unhelpful, since Sasuke's landlady is a middle-aged widow whose maternal heart would undoubtedly melt at the sight of poor, orphaned, valiant Uchiha Sasuke. The four of them decided that Sasuke should be the one to sweet-talk information out of her after Hyuga Hinata gave them Naruto's address. Sasuke was referred to her older cousin Nida Akane, who had promised to look after the apartment building for her, since Nida Akari had regrettably left the village to care for her ailing mother, who lived on a small farm a few miles outside the boundaries of the Konoha forest. Furthermore, Nida Akane proved to be one of those narrow-minded people who tenaciously held onto their dislike of Naruto. She had been too pleased to invite him to tea, too, to express sympathy for that Uzumaki. The tea was excellent, but this was not worth it. She pronounced his name in a way that made it sound remarkably like a monster, asking, "Don't you ever think how unfair it is? The fact that you, Uchiha, are in the same team with Uzumaki Naruto?" As though she was expecting Naruto to suddenly leap up from behind Nida Akari's kitchen counter, go crazy, and dye all of her household textiles orange. Her voice was clipped and fast. Because that was the worst Naruto-san could ever do to these fools, Sasuke thought bitterly. Taking everything into account, it was surprising that Naruto-san hadn't fled first. I have never thought about it, he said in a stern, icy tone, and he used his Sharingan to look into the graying woman's dust. Brown eyes. She raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical, but was compelled to turn away without receiving any clue. Sasuke gritted his teeth as she squawked, "How can you not think about it? What if he does something terrible?" He would decide that the hag didn't know anything after one more try and simply walk away, keeping his sanity intact. After saying, Naruto-san is a loyal shinobi of Konoha, he let the temperature in the room drop a bit more. The worst that can happen is that you get into an argument with him. You just don't argue with Naruto-san. It is painful, and you can't win. As a shinobi, it should be mentioned that Sasuke distinguished between a fight that he would undoubtedly win and an argument in which he would argue about things like whether they should eat sushi or ramen, or about the advantages of not defecting. When he used the word painful, he meant pain of the headache kind. Fighting could, of course, be a part of an argument, but that was a different kind of fighting because, as painful as it was for Sasuke to acknowledge, that was how you demonstrated your concern. He also gave a damn. Just a bit. If Naruto-san wasn't being excruciatingly annoying. In fact, it was most convenient to take care of him when he was out of the way. But that didn't mean he wasn't going to kick that fool for causing them so much anxiety. But Nita-san was a civilian. Sasuke saw that her hands were shaking so much that her spoon was constantly clinking against her teacup. It irritated me. She chewed on her lips and whispered, "Is he really that dangerous?" Sasuke scowled. "Only if you truly anger him," he said grudgingly in closing. Even though it was illogical, it seemed like Naruto leveled up, almost as if he could use his curse seal. He could see the red aura surrounding his teammate, feel the crackling against his skin when Naruto hit him, and feel the water shifting beneath their feet. He instinctively understood the last part of Nita-san's subsequent question, which had to do with Naruto, even though it wasn't even his power. Perhaps he returned with Naruto, but why? Use of force was involved. And rope, he said sternly. It took 2 miles and a lot of yelling before Naruto trusted him to walk alone after tying him up. Because the question was about what it was like to be on the same team as Naruto, the unfavorable outcome was that Nita-san squeaked in fear, her sympathy overshadowed by her imagination, and she fled the room that was now hers. Unaware that he had likely only permanently damaged her, Sasuke blinked as she walked away. For one Uchiha Sasuke, it was all in a day's work. This could have affected Naruto's recently redeemed reputation among the villagers, but fortunately for him, Nita Akane got courage from a sake jar before approaching her friends. Fortunately, she was a lightweight when it came to carrying her alcohol, so people assumed from her rambling, confused explanation that Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke were in a relationship and engaged in bondage. Of course, this had a completely different set of consequences, but that's a different story. It wasn't for lack of skill that Amino Iruka would remain a chunin for the remainder of his life. Since Iruka loved teaching and felt that having a jonin teacher at the academy would be a waste of money, he never applied for a jonin evaluation and, because he remained in the village, it was very unlikely that he would be promoted. However, he was a very good ninja, he was in charge of his students' safety, and many clan heirs and those who carried a keke genke were easy targets for kidnapping. 5 of his numerous attempts had been ruined by him alone. His only significant shortcoming was his colleague Mizuki, who was also infamously hard to lie to. And when Kakashi-san said that Jiraiya-sama had taken Naruto out of the village, he was positive that he was lying to him. He was only validated by the fact that his teammates were unaware of his location. Right behind her, Haruno-san had initially seemed to inquire about Naruto and Hyuga-san. Iruka had a strong will as well. It took a lot of willpower to look at the head of the Hyuga clan and say that no, Hinata-san wasn't going to graduate early, regardless of what her father thought was appropriate for the poor heiress. Overbearing parents, primarily those in high positions within their respective clans, always tried to force their children to graduate before they were ready. Naruto's location had to be known to the Sandaime Hokage, and Iruka was determined to extract the truth from the man, no matter what. Sometimes the easiest solution is the most difficult to locate. It wasn't as if there hadn't been any hints about the mystery of Naruto, and Neji found it extremely embarrassing what his performance so far demonstrated about his ability to observe. He was ultimately the one who connected the dots and arrived at the truth, a fantastic, awful, and rational response. Asking Heishi-sama, "I have wondered who the Uzumaki family are. I know nothing of Naruto. Sans origins, A delicate, extraordinary ink painting of bamboos and a crane moving among them was behind the man's back. Beside it was calligraphy so exquisite that it left him speechless. Neji's courage came from the fact that his father had created those two pieces. However, Sama glared at Neji after dropping his brush, leaving a noticeable stain on his tidy report. He glared better than most. After saying, Uzumaki-san has no family, he had told Neji to go. Neji did, but he didn't stop there. He broke into Amino Iruka's office and looked through his files. Although he hadn't planned on sneaking, the opportunity had been too good to pass up and the teacher wasn't present. In any case, he reminded himself, shinobi were supposed to be cunning. In addition, every time he looked into Hinata's loving, kind, and sisterly eyes, he was reminded of the enormous debt he owed Naruto-san. He was determined to repay her, even if it meant living out the rest of his days, beginning right now. Naruto-san's birth date was on his map, but those files didn't provide any details about his parents. According to the records, Naruto-san's birthday fell on the same day as Kyuubi's attack, which caused him to think of a bizarre series of coincidences. The inexplicable, unjustified animosity that nearly all adults had for Naruto-san had only lately subsided to the point where only a small percentage of them obstinately maintained their irritating contempt, while many appeared sheepish and even guilty when Naruto-san's name was brought up. Naruto-san had yelled at the top of his lungs that he understood Neji's feelings and what it was like to have a seal ruin your life. His quick friendship with Gaara-san, in spite of the fact that he had threatened Naruto-san's valuable teammates and attacked Konoha. Not to be overlooked is Gamabunta's transformation into a nine-tailed fox. Before realizing he could see through the fox to the toad inside, Neji's heart had nearly stopped from fear. Whispering, Kitsune Tasuki, Neji said. An old folktale term for a fox's possession is fox lunacy, Jinchuriki. It was the 15th day. Because most religions have rules like, don't kill, which are impossible for a shinobi to follow, very few shinobi were religious. For their own peace of mind, most people try to avoid thinking about the kind of bad karma that involves killing and killing some more. After all, no one wants to consider the possibility that they might be born with a tapeworm in their next life. Once more, though, Naruto was an exception. Naruto's reputation as that damn demon fox had prevented him from being accepted in the typical Buddhist or Shinto temples during his early years. Little Naruto, being Naruto, had been inspired to pursue the more exotic religions instead of letting this depress him. Sai asked Naruto-kun, who was kneeling in front of a black oval-shaped stone, "What are you doing?" Since it was covered in flowers, he assumed it was some sort of flower arrangement tool. He was only curious as to where Naruto-kun obtained the flowers. Naruto-kun wisely replied, "I'm praying this will go well, we're going to need it." Naruto was introduced to a diva named Shiva by an elderly shinobi who had come from a western land behind the sea and who hadn't given much thought to Naruto's tenet. Shiva was the creator, preserver, destroyer, revealer, and concealer of everything, making him a pretty important god in Naruto's eyes. In his little altar at home, he offered food offerings, flowers, and performed ablution for Shiva. He had met #ana.uk Kamui, the Kamui of the hunt, in the land of snow. She led hunters to game and protected them. Since the ninja were hunters, he assumed that this ancient goddess of the snow people's Ainu ancestors would look after him. She had seemed like a very kind deity to him. That issue was resolved because the Ainu did not believe in rebirth. He had intended to give her a share of his catch, but he chose to give her a portion of his mission payments instead because it would have been extremely repulsive and villainous to offer human body parts. Then there was ramen, which was a completely different matter. Looking at Naruto-kun strangely, Sai questioned, "Why? What kind of troubles are you anticipating? Could he have discovered what Danzo-san had in store for him?" "Something always happens. Our first C rank was supposed to be guarding Tazuna Baka from bandits, but we got Zabusa and Hiku-kun and then Sasuke-kun almost died. Then there was the Chunin exams and Orochimaru. And when we went to the land of snow to protect filmmakers, the lead actress was secretly a princess and we toppled a tyrannical regime. But I got a really cool goddess out of it." Naruto began to get upset but eventually began to smile. Very similar to Naruto, Sai thought. While some brought back costly weapons or jutsu scrolls, others brought back the Hittite of their defeated foes, and Naruto-kun returned with a new goddess. Sai wondered if this was how fondness felt because of the odd glow in his chest. Sai wasn't sure how that felt different from the basic version, but it might even be amused fondness. Further investigation was required. He inquired, "Are you packed yet?" Nodding, Naruto-kun gestured toward his pack and something round, roughly the size of his head, or perhaps several things, wrapped in kill.me. Orange cloth. The checking list continued, concluding with the following: 70 packets of emergency instant ramen, check. Mission rations, check. Chance of clothes, check. Bedroll and blankets, check. Kunai, shuriken, and ninja wire, check. Sai believed that he should no longer be so confused because he was aware of Naruto-kun's love for ramen, but what in Kami? Sama's name was Emergency Ramen? Oh well, perhaps it was best not to know. "I don't think it pays to take it with you. We won't be allowed to light a fire so you can't cook it," he reasoned. At his words, Naruto-kun's face lost all of its color, and his Kahai raised his eyes to the sky, but there was only drab gray concrete to beg with instead of blue sky. He declared bleakly, "I have offended my gods," and then glared at the tiny, black stone. Naruto-kun was now fairly wailing and wringing his hands, his glare changing in an instant into the most pitiful puppy dog eyes Sai had ever seen, wet, nervous, and slightly hopeful. "What have I done to deserve this? Do you hate me?" he asked. Sai was fairly certain Naruto-kun had used the plural, gods, when he said, "Maybe you should stop yelling at, them." He practically prompted, "Then they might hate you less, then." Not yelling at your gods had to do something, right? He had no idea what deities Naruto-kun worshipped or what might or might not offend them. However, there was no telling because Naruto-kun had chosen to follow these deities. Unbelievably joyful once more, Naruto declared, "I'm taking the ramen anyway. I'll just seal it into a scroll. I'm sure that Fu-chan has a kitchen." Sai briefly considered how tracking Naruto-kun's mood swings was like riding a carousel gone crazy, but he was distracted by a strange, heavy sensation in his chest that seemed to be related to a heart condition. Perhaps it was sadness, but in some way it felt more relaxed. Perhaps melancholy? Even Naruto could not make it possible for them to eat ramen together in Fu-san's kitchen. With hesitation, he said, "Naruto-kun," unsure of what to say. Prior to Naruto-kun, his world was sane, brutal, and black and white. Furthermore, Uzumaki Naruto was not harshly defined. He had no black and white, not even the elusive shades of gray Danzo-san had warned him about. Instead, he was open to all the colors of the rainbow, a new vibrant shade of life for every day of the week and 2 for Sundays. Sai also enjoyed it because he could see the color in everything when Naruto-kun was present. It was not his intention to saturate Naruto-kun's rose-colored lenses. Naruto-kun. "Naruto? You can drop the .kun, you know," Sai stated. "I can, Naruto." Sai didn't like the hesitancy in his voice and disapproved of the display of emotion out of habit alone, but he didn't say anything if Naruto-kun saw. His demands took up far more room than someone so small should have been able to. "Sure, it's bothersome to add the kun all the time. I'm turning into Shikamaru. Save me," he asked. "How can I save him? From what precisely? What did it mean to be a Shikamaru?" Even before he had the slightest possibility of figuring out the Shikamaru rescue, Naruto gave him a friendly shove that nearly knocked him flat on his face, making them even closer friends. Sai was reminded of the tales of Naruto calling forth Gamabunta as he effortlessly sealed the ramen rations into a scroll. Little cogs turned in Sai's head because it appeared that Jiraiya-sama had taught Naruto-kun, Naruto more than that. The man had a reputation for being flyer-like, but if Jiraiya-sama had actually taken Naruto as a pupil and he was still alive, could it be that it wasn't just one fanciful lesson? Perhaps Naruto's willingness to speak for him and Hibari Sensei in case of emergency was a very, very good thing. And since hiring Naruto had only been one major error so far, perhaps Danzo-san wasn't quite the genius he was supposed to be. At the entrance to the tunnel carved beneath the Hokage monument, they encountered Tomiko-san and Fu-senpai. There were no facial expressions to read because both dog and horse were wearing masks, but something about Fu-senpai's posture and the way his head was angled, possibly allowing him to watch Naruto from the corner of his eye even as his head was turned toward the tunnel, caused Sai's mind to spin even more. The problems of Fu-senpai and Hibari Sensei matched like a lock and a key. Sai had practically been taught to take advantage of others since he was a young child. His face was obscured by the shadows, so he pulled his immaculate mask up to cover up the faint tug of a muscle. There had never been a need to conceal a smile. So, just in time to miss the drama, they slipped out of Konoha and Root headquarters without anyone noticing. But they had plenty of entertainment because Naruto was a walking one-man slapstick comedy. It's a lamb. That's even better than a bunny. Sai thought glumly. At least Naruto was amused. It was difficult to determine whether Dog.san and Horse.san were. They were not the kind to be amused easily. My codename is Ram. As Naruto exclaimed, "Bah, cutesy little lamb." His face flushed with laughter. Kindly shut up. With a high-level Jinjutsu and a small group of juniper trees shielding them from most people's view, two men stood atop a tall, rocky hill overlooking Takigakure's hidden village. The only obvious similarity between them was that they both wore a black cloak with red clouds on it. The giant, blue shark man had thrown the conical straw hat with white stripes into a nearby stream a week prior, and the gorgeous, black-haired man wore it to cover his face. In addition, Hoshigaki Kisame was a blue, enormous shark man. In addition, he was currently dangerously bored. Looking at a pebble close to his foot, he complained, "What about the Kyubi?" It was a heavy, round, pleasant pebble. Kicking it would be childish, and kicking Itachi would lead to a fight. Perhaps it was difficult to say of the cold-blooded bastard, when they were meant to stay out of the spotlight until they killed Nakamura Fu in their sights. Besides, the bastard who had driven them to that bad village wasn't even close to being kicked. Pain had insultingly remarked, "He waits. He is the last," looking at Itachi as if he were trying to understand his thoughts, before turning back to Kisame and saying, "The Ichibi will be hard to acquire until things quiet some in Tsunade, so I will send you after the Nanabi instead." It was the most humiliating demotion ever to go from hunting the 9 tails to hunting the 7 tails. Ichibi would have been more embarrassing, all right, but still. When Kisame snapped his head around, he saw that the sudden blurry movement at the edge of his field of vision was actually a duck that landed in a small pool of water behind them. The only thing that saved Takigakure was that there was always water available. Kisame blurted, "Just a stupid, ordinary featherbrain. I wanted an ANBU," as he ran his hand over his sword's sheath. If the other side initiated the fight, it wouldn't be his fault, would it? A spot-billed duck to be precise. They are mainly gray with a paler head and neck and a black bill tipped bright yellow. The males also have a red spot at the base of the bill, Itachi replied in a bored monotone. Kisame tightened his jaw. "I hate you," he declared. The androgynous, furious man simply shrugged, a gesture that was only marginally tainted by the thick black coat that hung over his shoulders. Kisame believed that constantly making feminine gestures was a surefire way to get into trouble. Then, just as before he joined Akatsuki and met his partner, he recalled something he had heard in the wave that was completely unrelated at the time. Kisame only remembered that one-eyed innkeeper because he hadn't been bothered in the least by a huge, blue man with a huge sword that was blue enough to grab you by the eyes. After 10 large jars of really bad sake, he couldn't recall either, but he did remember that it had been the punchline of some dumb, inebriated joke. Kisame questioned, "Isn't that spot called Sharingan in Wave?" and was rewarded with the incredibly fulfilling sight of Itachi's entire body twitching. His stomach grew large with laughter, which erupted into a roaring roar. He literally fell to his knees and continued to laugh until he was unable to take it any longer. Duckface, he barely managed to snort and wheeze. Once more, Itachi twitched. He said, "I will kill you," with genuine emotion in his voice. Kisame's eyes were full of laughter, far too innocent and childish for a man of his caliber. "Dream on, Duckface," yelled Kisame. Itachi's mouth corners raised in a manner that was sufficiently reminiscent of a smirk to be easily recognized. Kisame was drawn down through black and something that rippled like water under a red moon by the swirling red and black, which captured and held his attention. After a few seconds, he rose roaring with rage after falling like a rock to the verdant grass. Even though there are only 8 of them, these individuals are regarded as extremely dangerous in a group of people who have a reasonable chance of taking over the known world. It's up for debate whether it's humorous or somewhat depressing. Sarutobi Hiruzen moaned aloud and briefly lowered his forehead to his desk as he heard the approaching footsteps. He had learned the value of hiding his emotions from his many years as a Kage, but Hitaki Kakashi was pushing him to the edge of that ability. The fact that he was powerless to discipline the man for his disobedience only made it worse. Technically, he could, but he was unable to speak because of the voice in his head that sounded a lot like Minato. The voice said, "I want the villagers to treat him like a hero." Genin Naruto was all but jumping up and down with joy for enrolling in an ANBU training program, walking with his escort like a lamb to a slaughter. Little Naruto asked with wounded eyes why everyone hated him, and Sarutobi was unable to respond. "For my child, is this the best you can do? Really? Instead, I ought to have given in to your demands and made you a sacrifice?" As a result, Sarutobi had to put up with all the harsh questions, constant begging, and accusations that were uncannily similar to those he had made up on his own. Then, more footsteps came, and he was relieved to learn that the drama of the day had been put on hold for the time being and that it was simply a change of guard. There was nothing he could do by thinking about Naruto right now. He forced himself to go through the Mission Office Security Update Report, which is released every quarter, much more easily now. He couldn't assign this to his subordinates 4 times a year, but today was so gorgeously overcast. The paper was immaculate white with clean, contrasting black ink, the lukewarm coffee in his cup. White with a ramen bowl print, which he had gotten from Naruto, whom he really shouldn't be reminded of right now, smelled so good. With no one to divert him from his work, he could handle it in peace. Sarutobi raised his face in time to witness the explosion of the seal. Enforced door to his office into a cloud of wooden splinters after a door was slammed somewhere and footsteps thundered up the stairs, shrouded in murderous intent. Fires of unholy rage burned around Slug Sanin Senju Tsunade as she marched through this cloud, and it took Sarutobi a fateful moment to realize it was her chakra. As she took Sarutobi by the collar and, in a show of strength, lifted him over his desk with one hand, Shizune-san was pacing after her and pleading with her to stop. Behind this pair was Kakashi-san, who had a lazy gait and one eye closed in a sunny smile. Sarutobi simply realized that he had been outwitted. "Could you please let me down now, Tsunade-san? The ANBU get very nervous when I get beaten up. They're supposed to be protecting their Hokage, you know?" said he. He sounded far more composed than he actually was. She yelled, "Don't you dare take that tone with me, Sarutobi Hiruzen. I came back because I figured that if Konoha had managed to breed and raise someone like Naruto-kun, things had changed, but I guess that's not how things are, Professor." Sarutobi flinched at the sound of that old nickname, with memories of the terrible times of the 2 great shinobi wars flashing through his mind. With her eyes burning like embers, she shook him with every threat with enough force to make his teeth clatter. "You owe that boy a debt, even greater than the rest of Konoha, since you were the one Minato entrusted him to. And if you won't abort this mission yesterday, I will punch you through the Hokage monument, skin you alive and roll you in a barrel of salt, castrate you and send you to Iwa with a red ribbon tied around your neck, not necessarily in that order," she said. In a manner unworthy of ANBU or any other Jonin, Viper and Thrush flitted toward them from the shadows, clearly hoping with all their hearts that he would not order them to hold his furious pupil. He started to appease her by saying, "Danzo and his clique are those who cause most of these ops, who created Root in the first place," and then he cursed himself, praying that his current bodyguards had no connection to Danzo, because if this were to leak, Naruto-kun would be dead. Perhaps he ought to have Ibiki-san hold them just in case. Now that he was able to regain his footing, Tsunade fairly purred, "So you decided to beat your enemy by becoming them? How Sasuke-esque route to take." Her voice was so sweet that it would likely erode his jawbone and teeth. He defended, "My situation is completely different," but even he found it to be a weak argument. There were similarities, despite the fact that his plan was legitimate and likely to succeed, in contrast to the defection of Uchiha Sasuke, which had been a case of curse seal-induced stupidity. Sarutobi had to force himself to remember how he truly deserved it all when Kakashi-san said, "I could take offense on behalf of my student," with a disgustingly smug voice. "But I think I will rather enjoy the show. Plus, he was that stupid. Do defend your argument, Hokage. Sama. Inquiring minds want to know, that traitor." A courteous, refined voice cut through the scene as everyone was making their way. "I hope this isn't an inconvenient time. There a question I would like to make, Hokage." "Sama," someone said. Turning his head, Sarutobi saw that Iruka-san had raised one eyebrow in that angry way he had always wished to learn, but had only been able to wiggle both in a really stupid way. Tsunade raised one eyebrow and said, "You are a friend of Naruto's, aren't you, Amino-san? Why was he the only one who could do that?" Iruka-san grinned and said, "Well, yes, and very concerned right now." His smile, which promised a pleasant, polite discussion about how all practice kunai had been replaced with rubber replicas, 1001. Hand push-ups, and a D-class cat retrieval mission, was exactly like the one that Hiwatari Sensei had given when Sarutobi was still a wet, behind the ears academy student. He reminded himself that Hiwatari Sensei had not had a scar on his nose and that his hair was brown rather than red. Tsunade grimly said, "Good. Once I'm through, you can have what's left of him." Tsunade. "Sama, please," Thrush attempted, stepping forward half a step. The man flinched as she snapped, "Don't you dare. Please, me," and flicked her finger in his direction. The Sandaime Hokage tried to defuse the situation by saying, "Tsunade-san, if you would let go of my robes." He was certain that it was only wise to verbally distance himself from his student at this point. He had a long, suffering, kind, and courteous voice. He was in a more uncomfortable position than he had recalled. Tsunade kept holding on to them until her knuckles turned as white as the fabric. "Do not tempt me. You don't get a say in this, old man. Tar, feathers, gelding knife, superglue, walnut groats, and 200 rabid squirrels." Sarutobi felt a violent, cold chill that went up his spine and then fell like a cold rock into the bottom of his stomach. Tsunade was unsettlingly skilled at threatening, despite the fact that the situation was completely unfathomable. From the door that had gone to the door's heaven, a girl's half-shocked, half-awed voice whispered, "Is Tsunade Sama threatening Hokage? Sama?" Once more, everyone looked in the direction of a group of genin, a boy and a girl, and then another boy and a girl in even pairs. Princess Pink was a blinding smudge next to somber and proper black and blue and pale, earthly ash. With an air of someone who was having a great time, Kakashi-san said, "Ah, Sasuke-kun, Sakura-chan and friends. How can we help you?" He wasn't even trying to pretend that porn was keeping him occupied for once. Sakura-san pointed at him and accused him, her cheeks flushed. "Some teacher you are," she said. Kakashi-san assumed a look of bewilderment and hurt. When Sasuke-san asked, "When exactly were you going to tell us that Naruto is a Jinchuriki?" a thick silence descended upon them, swallowing all speech. Sarutobi could hear the thunderous sound of Tsunade's breathing. With his mind racing, he asked, "Who told you this?" While he watched them closely and continued to be abused by Tsunade, he maintained as much dignity as he could. Even though the white pairs were more subdued, there were 4 sets of irate eyes. Hinata-san was holding her hands on her hips and appeared oddly assertive, while Sakura-san was clutching her shirt. He hoped they had the good sense to keep their discoveries to themselves because none of them appeared disgusted. "Hokage Sama, we didn't need anyone to tell us. Naruto-san's condition must be the worst. Protected S-class secret ever. If this is all the subtlety Konohagakure can do, we're in trouble. In fact, a regular vegetable should have known earlier, and the fact that we didn't doesn't reflect well on us," Neji-san bemoaned, glaring at him with a look that could have been reproachful if it hadn't been embarrassed. The Konoha shinobi had actually been taciturn, if not amiable. The civilians, who were unaware of the stakes, were always the hardest to persuade. Yes, Sarutobi had a great deal of respect for the Konoha civilian populace. He believed that a civilian should be called an honorary ninja if they could live in a secret village and not panic when a group of irate, half-dressed kunoichi ran past them, hurling sharp, pointy objects at a white-haired man who was laughing, or when all households were ordered to use their blackout curtains without warning or justification. However, they lacked discipline even back then. Sakura-san asked, "So where Naruto-kun is, Hokage Sama?" and Sarutobi thought she muttered Shanaru. Under her breath, he glanced at her and her companions, then at Tsunade, who was now holding him so tightly that his eyes were crossed, and finally at Iruka-san, who was still grinning. For a moment, he hoped for another invasion, or at least a nice, psychotic S-class killer. It was stated in the files of most other villages that Nakamura Fu of Takigakure no Sato was bipolar, but she wasn't. She was just a lonely girl who had developed the bad habit of allowing her surroundings to define who she was. It should be mentioned that in Konoha, people had a particular dislike for the Kyuubi and everything related to them, but no general dislike for the Jinchuriki, or at least not prior to Sabaku no Gara. Fu wasn't particularly fortunate because, despite the fact that Nanabi no Kabutomushi had never even glared Takigakure incorrectly, people still avoided Fu. When forced to speak with her, many would move to the opposite side of the street, avoid making eye contact, and shinobi would always keep their hands close to their weapons. Civilians would also decline to serve her. Fu had become frantically eager to please Naruto, who had chosen to become the owner of the brightest jumpsuit in the known world. She had a private sensei named Yukimura Masayoshi and a caretaker named Nishimura Fuyumi. Their sensei would frequently chuckle when they made a Mura combination. He liked that Fu was vivacious, upbeat, and energetic, as that was undoubtedly an indication that her biju had not yet established itself. Nishimura was an old-fashioned woman who believed that if Fu ever wanted to get married, she should at least act like a proper woman, quiet, submissive, with passive body language and good manners, because she was working with the handicap of being a Jinchuriki. They both wanted the best for her. Nishimura. Obasama was disappointed when she was happy, and Yukimura. Sensei was concerned when she was quiet. Fu was unable to choose which one to please. She couldn't stand Yukimura. Sensei's haunted expression for much longer, so this quiet month would soon come to an end. In her Obasama's home, Fu sat down in front of the fireplace and took a deep green tortoise shell from a wooden box she had asked her sensei to purchase especially for this use. The shell had been sawed and polished into a pot-shaped pentagular piece. Although this method of divination was expensive, she didn't really have much money to spend. Additionally, it was somewhat challenging because it required several days of purification, and it was difficult to find a week in which she hadn't recently killed someone or been sent to kill someone. In the dark room, she muttered, "What will the next cycle be like? Will this be the last, or will I lose my resolve once more?" She had closed the blinders for this, even though it was bright midday outside. Perhaps this was a dumb move, but she simply couldn't perform divination without the right atmosphere. Fu had discovered this from an elderly Buddhist nun who lived close to the secret village of Takigakure. She was a calm elderly woman with wrinkles on her face, white hair, and white eyes who was unable to recognize that the lovely, courteous girl who frequently visited her had bright, vivid green hair, the sign of a Biju. She had a red pot of water with 5 bamboo sticks, thinly split, lined across the mouth. Black ink was used to write a symbol onto magical line, inside each hollow carved into the shell. Keeping in mind the bandaged wrist that had earned her 5 days off, she took a black cherry tree branch and burned it in a purifying fire before placing it against each of the magical lines to scorch them. The first fissures appeared on the upper side of the shell opposite the lines, and she soon heard the first sharp crack. Using the bamboo sticks, she quickly poured cold water onto 3 areas of the shell's upper surface, highlighting the cracks. She then looked at them, her brow quickly furrowing in confusion. She hadn't been looking into this at all, and anyway, I'm going to be in mortal peril, but good things will come of it, a brother? That'll be the day. She and others like her never experienced such things. Broken bones would be her only escape from mortal danger. You are going to recall Naruto-kun, or else what? It is illegal to geld your cage, you know. Notably, Sarutobi Hiruzen was a courageous individual. He was known as the god of Shinobi and had participated in 2 great ninja wars. He would gladly give his life to protect his village's best interests if things ever got tough. But, as the head Irio.nin of Konoha Hospital, I can override you in medical matters. I will declare you unfit for duty, make you eat hospital food until Naruto.kun comes back. Make you attend therapy where you will have to keep daily diary of your innermost feelings and play with a pink, squishy ball and wear green paper gown the whole time. Carry out painful rectal examinations on you. Let my interns use you as a practice dummy when they first lean acupuncture, confiscate all contraband literature, and the new, experimental medication just might have the unfortunate side effect of erectile dysfunction. However, nobody is that courageous. Ultimately, Sarutobi had never been more relieved to lose. The fact that he gave way before Okubo Hibari entered through the destroyed door with a stack of papers longer than her tanto should also be seen as to his advantage. Mission. Abandoned is the root of the problem. Start the new mission. Save Jinchuriki Naruto. Or Tsunade. Sama will cause horrible suffering to responsible parties. Suborn Number 2. Tsunade was firmly in charge of the Naruto rescue effort. Okubo Hibari intercepted the squad Naruto had been sent out with and persuaded them that their Danzo Sama had cancelled the mission, which was planned even though it would not involve any violence. It was straightforward, but that was its advantage. Horse and Dog had no reason to suspect Okubo.san of lying, and Sai.san would not object. Plan B was for Hitaki Kakashi to come forward and give them the actual orders, signed by Sandame Hokage, in case they caught them in the act. It was difficult to avoid plants in a forest, so Tsunade didn't think Danzo's pet fanatics would comply. However, the goal was to divert Horse and Dog's attention and keep them occupied while Yamato.san crept up behind them, grabbed Naruto, and took them with his willing assistance. Naruto could prevent this by taking matters into his own hands and leaving the situation, a situation known as Circumstance B1. The more likely scenario B2 was Naruto starting to quarrel with his squad. Captors, which would probably lead to a fight because Yamato couldn't approach him undetected. Sai.san was Naruto's backup, so it wasn't like he couldn't defend himself. However, Tsunade had included herself as well because Horse and Dog were ANBU and therefore extremely dangerous, particularly in hostage situations. In any event, she would not have stayed behind, but that was irrelevant. When Akatsuki crashed their party, She responded that her skills would be useful when everything inevitably went to hell in the proverbial handbasket. Sarutobi. Sama had objected, claiming that Tsunade was needed in the hospital. In Scenario C, Uchiha Itachi and Hokage Kisame interrupted their party. Nakamura Fu's knockout was optional. Haruno Sakura couldn't be included because that would have been playing favorites and she didn't have anything to offer the mission. And Uchiha Sasuke couldn't be included because Tsunade could not possibly trust him in the nation where his brothers had been spotted. Since Hyuga Neji's Byakugan should be helpful in the hunt for the Root Squad and he could be relied upon to rescue Naruto and flee if, when, Akatsuki became involved, he was included. Additionally, because he lacked the sense of self-preservation that the kami gave to a drugged-out lemming, he was able to drag Naruto away by force. The squad Naruto was sent out with has gained a good head start, but they have no reason to run all the way to Takigakure. We should be able to catch up with them before anything too permanent happens to anyone, Tsunade stated. Any questions? With a distracted shake of his head, Neji focused on something else. With his Byakugan turned on, he was able to see Uchiha-san, Haruno-san, and his cousin huddled together just outside the Hokage tower, engaging in what seemed to be a whispered conversation that was laced with wild, irate gestures, at least from Haruno-san. Hinata. Sama appeared anxious, fiddling with her thumbs in a way that was painfully familiar, and Uchiha-san was motionless, but his face spoke volumes for once. They couldn't mean to go out alone, could they? Uchiha-san was still on parole, but he was far from a model citizen. Even he must be aware of the consequences of leaving the village without permission. There's no doubt that Hinata Sama could help Naruto. Sans less than disciplined teammates. Neji was about to tell Tsunade Sama what he thought when he noticed some ANBU marching in the direction of the tower. The three people at the base of the tower turned to stare, merchants' charts screeched to a halt, and people on the street stopped to stare after them. Councilman Danzo walked between tall, commanding figures in green vests, their faces obscured by white porcelain painted to resemble a hare, dog, monkey, and rooster. He was blindfolded, his hands were tied behind his back, his clothes were bloody and ripped, and the person wearing the rooster mask was guiding him roughly. Additionally, now that Neji was paying attention, Rooster's body language showed signs of extreme anger. When he looked, he saw that Naruto-san's teammates and his cousin had left, and it was time for them to follow suit. They couldn't be foolish enough to leave Konoha, and no matter how furious Uchiha-san and Haruno-san are with Danzo-san, they couldn't possibly do anything foolish in Konoha either. Almost every culture has a saying or two about the bad effects of assuming things. There's a reason for that. Even by those standards, the forest that surrounded Konohagakure no Sato was remarkable, and Hai no Kuni was a land of breathtaking scenic beauty. Rugged peaks, turbulent rivers, rocky gorges, and even tiny waterfalls were among the beautiful treasures hidden within the dense forest. The lakes were fed by snow and were so clear that you could see the golden sand at the bottom, even in the middle of the lake. The water was so cold that swimming in them would have been suicidal at night, since it was a zone under Konoha military law, where trespassing was prohibited, frequently patrolled, and generally prohibited. Only the ninja were ever able to see this. Ordinary travelers only ever saw the convoluted, winding roads through Konoha Forest, where the courier nin firmly escorted them to ensure that no one made any unapproved detours. Of course, some places were off limits for completely different reasons. The 44th training ground, also known as the Forbidden Forest, was the one closest to Konoha. A person is not necessarily good at naming things just because they are a fierce shinobi who creates his own secret village. While those areas appeared to be your average, ordinary forest from the outside, the interior was a completely different story. In those areas, the forest was so dense that it was easy to locate areas that were totally dark, even during the height of the day. Giant, poisonous centipedes with unsightly, pinkish-red, blotted bodies, giant, poisonous snakes, and pretty much giant, poisonous everything lived in those places. Now, Naruto and his ANBU teammates were racing across one of those lovely, icy, snowy lakes. Naruto was keeping up a fast pace, so they were moving swiftly. Since the lake was freezing and he was only wearing his military issue sandals, he wasn't one of those shinobi who believe that discipline is more important than temperature. Venomous, enormous leeches would pursue them and attempt to poison and suck them dry because it was also one of those dangerous locations. They were running for that reason as well. He complained to his fellow soldiers, who all essentially refused to walk around the lake because doing so would have required an unnecessary detour, which the route didn't take. "If my toes turn black and fall off, it's all your fault," he said. The route was extremely cold. swift-footed and disciplined. And damn those overachievers, was aimed at the leeches, who launched yet another attack, causing the water to shatter in the sunlight, rather than Sai, Tomiko, Chan, or Fu.San. Using a cage bunshin, Naruto sidestepped and diverted their attention. Without mentioning anyone in particular, he questioned, "What's the difference between poisonous and venomous anyway? Why are there two words for the same thing?" Sai was the first to respond, "It's poisonous if you bite it, and venomous if it bites you." They eventually arrived at the shore and a section of the forest that, at the very least, appeared to contain no more dangerous creatures than a few boars. They continued to run. Shinobi can experience that occasionally. They are simply so accustomed to the physical strain that it feels natural to them. It was even more natural to Naruto than breathing, since the brain synapses that would have told a normal person to stop because it drained them and killed their legs had been fried years ago. Naruto was able to bounce and shout, attack every obstacle with gusto, and generally annoy the poor, stuffy elders while running due to the fortunately innocuous flaw of Yondaime's seal. The constant bleeding of Kyuubi no Yoko's chakra into his system. A living example of Rakudo Sennin's law of inertia, which states that an object in motion will not stop until it is stopped by another force, was Naruto. Friction wasn't enough in his case. Since they had no real reason to stop, Naruto and his friends ran, and rescue team Tsunade ran after them without gaining any advantage. The day was ideal for running as well. The sun was warm and filtered through the dense, verdant foliage. They ran through a forest where gold beetles were swarming the tree trunks. Those busy, glittering bug rugs brought back memories of Naruto's early years, before the orphanage had decided they had had enough. He wasn't sure if the term, gold beetle, was a real one or merely a made-up childhood term. At least once a week, Naruto had slipped his guardians and entered the area of the village that the keepers had always warned their charges not to go to, simply for fun. In retrospect, Naruto had not realized what was supposed to be so exciting about those women with their faces painted red and white, so it had been much less exciting than he had anticipated. There, however, he had met the Gold Beetle Man. A retired shinobi, the Gold Beetle Man's real name had been Aburame Hiro. Given his long, thin neck, sharply angled face, and enormous eyes with the opaque film of cataracts, along with his shapeless coat of an unidentifiable color, he had a peculiar appearance. However, it was his pet beetles, almond-sized, green, and golden insects tied to tiny cotton thread leashes, that had captured little Naruto's attention. "This reminds me of this one guy the first knew when I was little. One of the few people who were nice to me back then," he stated to Sai. He described how he had taken in the beetles because he didn't feel well without tiny feet skittering all over them, even after losing his colony of Kikai because his chakra system couldn't handle the strain any longer. "He even let me pet them since I promised to be careful to not hurt any. They would fly in circles over his head like some strange cloud." Shino.San was really surprised I wasn't freaked out by his bugs, and that's why. He told me about his shinobi days and bitched about the whoopee ninja a lot. "I met few of those too in Yuki no Kuni. They were playing when people got killed." Naruto opened his mouth. Princess Koyuki deserved more noble status than that because she was cool. Sai inquired, "What is a whoopee nin?" Naruto had never expressed it in words before, so he had to consider it. "It's the stupid, rich nobles who want to learn jutsu that makes things explode a lot. Hey, let me give you examples. Real ninja want to protect their village and precious people, or the country and daimyo. The bad ones do it for money or because they like killing. Whoopee ninja want to win bar brawls and pick up girls. And boy, did Gold Beetle Man get upset about those. When someone with too much money and time offered a high salary to learn ninja skills, he was the designated victim because he was too old to participate in combat missions. However, the customers were not informed that he was only learning very basic D-rank jutsu and academy level kunai throwing. After 10 lessons, they believed they were fierce fighters. Real ninja study since early childhood, first as a group and later under more individual tutelage, Sai told him. The overly adorable lamb mask prevented Naruto from seeing his face, but he decided to assume that Sai was grinning beneath it. A genuine, sincere smile. It was a start, but it would be a little small. Sai would be converted to Ramanism and the Blessed Orange service before he knew it. Whoopee ninja hire a teacher for a week at a time because they are emo teenagers and want to do cool stuff. This was his sixth reason, not because he didn't enjoy doing cool things. When real ninja create new jutsu, they do so knowing the exact difference the different hand seals will make, Tomiko, Chan said. Even though she made him and all the other men en route eat her terrible attempts at cooking, Tomiko, Chan always treated him well, but her eyes and voice were always so flat. Though she was more adept at acting, she was essentially the same Sai, albeit a zombie kunoichi going through the motions. Naruto wouldn't have been shocked if she had begun to complain about brains. He even had the impression that she wasn't all that awful in the kitchen because it was simply not humanly possible, but rather that she was just doing something poorly because actual people were doing something poorly. When Naruto got hunches like that, he detested it. Why did it have to be something painful every time? Did he never have a suspicion that someone was going to have a typical life? One that included marriage, 2 children, a goldfish, and not a nindog? Tomiko. Chan actually winced when he said, "Whoopee ninja changed the snake into dragon since that makes the jutsu more powerful, right?" Naruto wouldn't have understood why it was such a big deal a few weeks ago, but Hibari Sensei had taught him vampire jutsu and warned him that making that small alteration would transform it into heart exploding suicide jutsu. Who would have guessed? With 2 Fus around, things could get very confusing. Sai poked Fu.San, first gently and then firmly. Sai cocked his head as Fu.San turned to face him. Naruto was certain that the plastic smile had returned. He thought, baby steps, baby steps. Sai pointed at Naruto after deciding that even pretend subtlety was inappropriate, suggesting that he had a similar opinion of the man he had been pecking at like a bird. With a sigh, Fu.San capitulated politely. Real ninja have their weapons custom made the second they can afford it, he stated. This game was starting to appeal to Naruto. He smiled and said, "Whoopee ninja have daddy's credit card and lots of catalogs." He became irritated when he realized no one would see it. When no one could see your face, it was awful to be expressive. As a barefoot Konoha native who was taught by Kakashi Sensei and who had nearly killed a really nice gender confusion-prone person named Haku who had gone on to die anyhow, Naruto knew that the Shinobi rules said something about hiding your feelings, or perhaps it was to have none at all. Naruto's nindo was to always be superior to his own, as true shinobi created their own. Damn it, he was expressive, too. The ANBU was attempting to oppress him, so he had to discuss this with old man Hokage. Danzo. Jerk was also a mastermind of evil. He most likely stole candy from babies and kicked puppies as a pastime. I have also met a few of those, though only in passing, offered Fu.San. As if unsure whether he should be speaking at all, he spoke slowly. There are rich lordlings in Edo who alone support half the prefecture's blacksmiths and sealmakers. Horse. Chan, or Tomiko. Chan as he should call her, cautioned him, "Don't feel too sorry for them, dog, because they were all wearing masks. With the allowance their rich daddies give them, they can afford it. And I know some perfectly nice blacksmiths in the capital who should only soak them for every yen they can get." And her voice became more lively. Primness and a glimmer of something else were present. For some reason, Naruto assumed she was fond of blacksmiths. Blacksmiths? He had been wondering about that for a while. "Have you ever thought about the color scheme thing?" Sai responded. He made it a point to never exclude anyone, so it's not that he was excluding Horse, Chan and Dog.San, but he was focusing on Sai. Sai retorted, "Color scheme of what?" Because he could see how Buddhists believed that making weapons was wrong, he asked, "You know how the bad guys always wear black, right? And practicing the dark arts is a bad thing and the light side is the good guys. Smith is the person who makes smithy things, so is being called blacksmith some kind of moralist statement?" Perhaps their propaganda had crept into the unconscious of the shinobi world. The not conscious level of thinking unconscious, or was it subconscious? Not the kind of unconsciousness that left you lying on your back with a bump in your head. And now he had everyone's attention. Fu.San narrowly avoided colliding with a tree, and that was something from ANBU. "There are moments when I truly question how your mind functions," Sai said. Naruto gave a shrug. "Lots of people do. My thought processes made the Psych Ninja cry once, in the academy, when they were making sure we weren't going to go nuts and kill people on them if they taught us something. Or it could have been the wasabi I put in her coffee, I'm not sure." Naruto's entire existence was violently at odds with his ideal self. In the face of the grimmest profession in the world, the service of the Shinigami, the grim reaper of all lives, he was overwhelmingly happy. He was open and honest about his many bonds when shinobi should destroy their hearts. He was obvious when shinobi should be subtle, and he was an honorable fighter when the shinobi had been created to do the daimyo's dirty work so their precious samurai could retain their honor. The Jinchuriki of the strongest of the tailed beasts, he was a killer with around 0 body count and no blood on his hands. Tomiko, as she was known, struggled to understand him. The fact that he was Uzumaki and the Jinchuriki of Kyubi no Yoko, however, was what really upset her. It was improper for those words to be in the same language, much less the same sentence. Tomiko hadn't felt angry in years, the last time being when Uzumaki Yugo changed her name to Uzuki Yugo. However, she discovered that she could still feel angry when she watched Uzumaki Naruto. She winced as Naruto-san remarked, "Whoopee ninja changed the snake into dragon since that makes the jutsu more powerful, right?" The root didn't appeal to her, but then, she didn't like anything anymore, and at least she had never had to put up with such jerks. Depending on the whole, changing the snake into a dragon would either intensify a jutsu or flip the focus. Tomiko began to question herself after meeting Naruto-san. She really was devoted to Danzo sama. He was her pillar of support in the world of shifting sands, the one true nindo who recognized the value of defending Konoha at all costs. Therefore, why did she think that Danzo sama was one of those ninja wannabes who changed hand seals without doing their research when she thought of Naruto-san en route? If he was that dumb, then why did she think that? Day 15/1, Count of Suborns 2. Whoopee ninja bashing captured on camera by the surveillance seal. When the puppeteer's partner, Mori Deidara, was momentarily unavailable, Hidan was paired with Akasuna no Sasori. Pain's policy regarding the explosion of Akatsuki's premises was that the perpetrators had to fix what they had damaged. They wouldn't be able to learn their lesson without the use of any jutsu. As Deidara repeatedly demonstrated, some people didn't learn it even back then. Pain turned Kuni into a puppet and spy when he wanted an independent fuinjutsu master to work for the daimyo of Tsuchi no Kuni, so he turned to Sasori Hidan as a backup. What was surprising was that it was a very poor match. Sasori had a very practical attitude on life. He rarely became upset over challenges and he rarely displayed strong feelings. Hidan preferred to kill people one at a time because he saw slaughter as a religious vocation and frequently enjoyed making his opponents' deaths as agonizing as possible. He had little interest in soulless, mechanical mass destruction. They ought to have been at least functional partners, if not bosom buddies, as nobody in Akatsuki did that except for Pain and Conan. Rather, Hidan irritated Sasori, who then encouraged Hidan to brag. Both of his subordinates stood up a little straighter when Pain asked, "What part of turn Higurashi-san into a puppet involves the complete destruction of his body and the stronghold he was staying at? Hidan-san? Sasori-san? In Hidan's case, it was more outrage than anything else." He eyed Sasori and the doll boy eyed him back, and there was a pregnant pause. "He started it," exclaimed Hidan, skewering the other with his finger. Before it connected, Sasori sidestepped and bowed to Pain. He kissed her and said, "I'm sorry, Pain sama, it won't happen again." Hidan sneered at him. Unlike the other pansies, he had no respect for their leader, even though he acknowledged his authority. He also didn't think much of his sanity and wasn't above threatening him with gory death on occasion. It wasn't a bad idea to get a dirty lot of money, then force all the hidden villages into bankruptcy by lowering the cost of missions and making everyone reliant on them in the Biju. Then turn on everyone and take over the world, but doing this for the sake of world peace? Hidan detested hypocrites more than he detested nuts, and Pain was both. "We could just kill the daimyo. It's not like he won't wind up dead down the road anyway," he suggested. Being the leader of a group of insanely strong ninja who didn't want world peace had its drawbacks in situations like these. Hidan was not envious of him. Sasori-san, inform Deidara-san that he is released from punishment duty. Hidan-san, take over the rebuilding of the North East Wing. With no jutsu. Pain's voice was actually trembling. Hidan grinned. Then he recalled. He had roared, "Flee! Flee before the scourge of Janshin sama," as his triple bladed scythe sliced through the ranks of uniformed ninja who were swarming him with enormous, blood-red swipes. He grinned as he took in their ninjutsu. He used his scythe to cut through their taijutsu. His skin turned black and bone white as he called forth the might of his most glorious god with his sinful heart, laughing in their faces as they attempted genjutsu. To kill and maim is the ultimate thrill. Alongside him, Sasori rushed in with his human and living corpse puppets, defiling life and death in a delicious and repulsive way. Then the blast started. Hidan remembered the explosions, and his eyes actually misted with pure joy. The stronghold and a quarter-mile of surrounding landscape were destroyed by the glorious explosions that were blood, crimson, pale yellow, and death white. For good measure, he had salted the ground, which still smelled of charred flesh and bones. "I regret nothing." 7 days prior Hidan wished that bastard nitfucking Pain had been killed. He had tarred his hands, hair, and robes black and repaired the roof's holes, which were more numerous than the roof's remaining area. After 3 days, some of it was still smeared under his fingernails, and the faint odor that pervaded his surroundings was driving him insane. Now that he had fixed the windows, door casings, and window casings, it was time to build cabinets to replace the ones that Deidara's moment of stupidity had destroyed. He had had enough. He began reviewing ongoing missions after storming the cabinet that served as their mission office. He was drawn to the manila folder featuring the Jinchuriki of Nanabi no Kabutomushi, Uchiha Itachi, and Hoshigaki Kisame, which was marked with red shoe, yellow nan, and green number 7. His face lit up with an angelic smile as he leafed through it. She appeared to be well trained and ranked 3rd in terms of tail count. She could likely give him a good workout, and even if she didn't, he would still be able to get rid of his frustration and the lingering sensory memory of the smell of sawdust and tar after fighting Itachi and Kisame for stealing their thunder. He clenched his jaw, touched his scythe's handle, and then gave an apologetic grimace. He had calluses from all that menial labor. It was the calluses of a hammerman and those who were not worthy of touching his weapon, not the kind of calluses one would get from handling weapons. Without giving much thought to how he would have to perform carpentry himself going forward, he exclaimed, "Great Janshin. Sama, once the world has been conquered, I swear to give all those who practice the vile art of carpentry to you as an offering. Sometimes villains make mistakes like that." Would he perhaps make a quick detour through the neighboring mountain? They would be good starters because there were some Buddhist hermits living up there. To put himself in the right frame of mind. 6 days prior to now, Naruto was lying on all fours with his forearms and forehead flat against the sweat damp red tatami, having stripped down to his pants. When Hibari Sensei demonstrated this exercise to him, she acted as if she had no backbone, but in reality, it was much more challenging. Perhaps it was because he didn't have some weird ANBU supernin gelatin back, but rather a real bone spine. He inhaled deeply, shifted his hips, relaxed his hands, and positioned his shoulders. "Balance, you can keep it," he told himself. "Have faith." His left leg was stretched back and up, followed by his right. The vertical line of his body was taut, with his toes now pointing up towards the roof where his previous attempt at C-class Jinjutsu had scraped off all the plaster from the previous day. He exhaled and steadied himself. Even his tough shoulder muscles tensed, but Naruto clenched his jaw, focused intensely, and bowed his spine while tipping forward. Sai, who had been holding his position for the past 10 minutes as if he had done this exercise all his life, was standing next to him with ease. The only thing he could see of Hibari Sensei was her legs, which were covered in hakama. Naruto snarled and hunched over until he heard his heels tapping his head. He stretched his neck as far as he could, but all he could see was Hibari Sensei's waist. "Yes, Tiger Scorpion Asana. I did it," he exclaimed. What was the point again?" According to Hibari Sensei, yoga will teach you some self-discipline and make you more flexible. This was clearly one of those "for your own good" things because Naruto's muscles were already hurting. "Good luck with that," he said loudly. He wasn't attempting to be ironic. "I guess that self-awareness isn't too bad either," sighed Hibari Sensei. "And keep quiet. If you can better control your breathing, it will be simpler." Naruto was still convinced that human spines shouldn't bend that way, but he wasn't going to sit like a weakling lotus when Sai was attempting the most challenging position in the manual. Later, he could torture Sasuke with one more he could perform, but Sasuke couldn't. Muahahaha. Though he didn't believe Itachi was the kind to laugh, Sasuke found that evil, silent laughter and torture reminded him of something. "Aside from Itachi and Kisame, are there any other members of Akatsuki that you are aware of?" Hibari Sensei was asked by Naruto. She said, classified information, and adjusted Naruto's ankles. He didn't see the significance of the change, but whatever. "However, they are pursuing me. In order to better protect myself, shouldn't I know?" He let out a moan and left the position. Hibari Sensei refused to give in, but when it was time to go to bed later that night, he launched an attack on Sai. It took him more than 30 minutes to wrangle, but he mainly suspected that Sai gave in so Naruto would stop talking and they could both sleep. By the time Sai gave in, Naruto kind of wanted to slap himself unconscious because he was exhausted and the bed coverings were so warm, but if he didn't insist, he would never learn anything significant. "Don't tell anyone because I only know of one and I'm not allowed to. I don't know his family name, but he's a Janshinist. His name is Hidan," and in the dim light that came in from beneath the door, Sai's eyes glittered gloomily. "Where is Janshin?" Naruto inquired. Sai signaled the end of the conversation by turning away from Naruto and saying, "He is an evil god." "What sort of fool makes the effort to become a walking chiche?" God of evil, I mean. But in order to prevent being killed while he was asleep, he let it go. The evil god Janshin followed Naruto into his dreams, taking the shape of a strange, maniacal, cackling giant bunny with many tails. It was difficult to determine how many because they all looked like one big, fluffy ball. That burned down a lot of things before Gaara suddenly showed up and gave it a desert funeral, after which it changed into an undead zombie god and two men with a piano entered the dream, and Naruto spent the rest of the night dreaming about ramen and nothing else. Everyone occasionally has strange dreams, and most of the time nothing comes of them, except for some extremely odd looks when the dreamers attempt to recite them to their friends. However, Janshin and evil bunnies were now firmly linked in Naruto's mind. Not because Uchiha Sasuke didn't understand why he wasn't part of saving his teammate, but because he and Sakura-san were Naruto Baka's teammates. Damn it, if he had known about Itachi, he would have been even less happy about it, probably to the point where he would have up and left, consequences be damned, and Sakura would have gone with him. As it was, he became preoccupied with his penchant for retribution. Sasuke remembered Ibiki-san, and if it had been someone else, he might have acknowledged how undesirable the man's situation was, if not actually pitied him, but now all he felt was anger that the man had gotten off easy. It started when he saw the ANBU walking councilman Danzo by them, not even noticing three genin as they led the traitorous man into the tower, supposedly to be interrogated by the Hokage before being handed over for the interrogation department. Sasuke wasn't a Naruto kind of shinobi. His view of the world was much dimmer, his opinion of people much lower, and he was very apt at reading between lines what the adults, his superiors, would have preferred he didn't. Fact 1. Danzo-san had forced Naruto-san into an illegal branch of ANBU, no doubt planning on using the Jinchuriki to further his traitorous goals. Fact 2. There was no way Naruto-san would have taken that lying down. The idiot didn't understand the concept of lying to save his skin. Fact 3. Now Naruto was somewhere unspecified and Senju Tsunade herself was included in the rescue team. Conclusion. Naruto was fucked. Naruto-san was fucked, and now the Hokage had the gall to forbid Sasuke from joining the rescue. Additional fact. The only reason Danzo-san had gotten his slimy paws on Naruto-san was because the Hokage had allowed him to, in order to use Naruto as a spy. Naruto, a spy. A spy in an organization led by someone as ruthless as Danzo. Sasuke wasn't only mad, he was enraged beyond anything he had ever felt if Itachi didn't count, and the one he intended to take his feeling out on was marching right past him. Sasuke wasn't in the mood to be obedient, and Naruto-san had almost automatically become his best friend, or as close to a best friend as he could ever let himself have, with those red pinwheel eyes of his brother forever haunting the edges of his consciousness. He yelled, "Come with me now," and seized Sakura-san and Hinata-san by the wrist, pulling them both away from the tower and figuring out a distance that would keep them from being perceived as loitering while still being within range of Hinata. Sans Byakugan. He noticed a sudden motion, but it was just an empty paper bag that the wind was carrying. "Why you won't do anything that isn't advised, will you?" Like someone who already knew the answer, Hinata-san muttered. "Don't mess it up, you're still on parole." Sasuke, who had learned to glare people into submission at a young age, glared at them as Sakura-san hissed at him angrily. "Danzo-san is to blame because that idiot Naruto has gotten over his head. We're going to talk." As anticipated, Hinata-san gave in first. Sasuke wasn't blind. He knew that she had the same feelings for Naruto that Sakura-san had for him. Naturally, Hinata-san was much less obnoxious about her feelings. "Which person are you going to speak with? What are you getting my teammate involved in, and what does this have to do with Naruto-kun?" The words were accompanied by a puppy's bark. 3 clans now had heirs, and one of them had a self-declared bride. Konoha Nights were similar to Konoha Days in that they were frequently filled with political intrigue, both positively and negatively, and occasionally they were even entirely coincidental. There was a small forest near the village and a few peaks, not to mention the waterfall the village was named after and the giant tree in the middle of it, but getting to that cover required sneaking through the surrounding landscape, which was very well patrolled and full of small outposts. Although Takigakure was not particularly hidden in the middle of the plains of Taki no Kuni, as its name suggested, it was surrounded by endless, hopelessly flat fields of rice and wheat, making it a bitch of a job to sneak in while trying to stay hidden. "I have a better plan," Naruto said, glaring at the wet rice fields. The scene was very picturesque, with the sun setting in a deep red, but it seemed foolish to spend the entire night crawling through knee-deep water and sleeping on a muddy bank. It would be cold, wet, dirty, wet, slow, wet, and what would Fu-chan think if she saw them completely covered in mud? What is it? Fu-san inquired. Naruto appreciates that ANBU always paid attention, even when they didn't agree with his ideas. For example, when he suggested that they have an office party, he had already prepared the hot cocoa and gotten the ramen, but they listened first, always remembering that even if they couldn't come up with a better idea, someone else might. We enter as customers. They must blame Orochimaru for everything, which always brightened Naruto's day. We are going to have to travel through the Ta no Kuni and there are all those freak missing ninja running around free, so we are going to need the protection, he improvised. Fu-san thought, the idea has some merit, but they would see our faces, and he stroked the handle of his sword. And we would have to leave most of our weapons behind. True, Naruto hadn't given it much thought, all he wanted was to avoid crawling to Takikakure. But he was on a roll now, and he dealt with the flaws in his plans the same way he dealt with other challenges. By not backing down or taking a different route, he managed to persevere. That's not too difficult. You guys pick up new jutsu quickly because you're ANBU, right? Take a look at this. And when it dissipated, he was covered in white smoke from a single handsu, ram. He was about as tall as he always was, but much more slender, with long, dark brown hair and brown eyes, dressed in a simple orange traveling kimono and a funny, pointy straw hat. His skin was pale, and he had no possession. Marks on his cheeks. He looked, in short, like any of Hinata's cousins if not for his eyes. Of course, he had breasts. Sai wasn't surprised because he'd seen enough random gender bending, but Tomiko-chan scowled. She cupped Naruto's right breast, causing him to blush and stammer, before placing her hand on Naruto's shoulder. Why do perverts always bother me? Tomiko-chan snorted, and Naruto groaned. When she attempted to release the Jinjutsu, Kai, nothing happened, and Naruto gave her a strange look. That is enough to break most Genjutsu. She knitted her brows and explained, that's not a simple Genjutsu. It wasn't a question. Most henge doesn't pass the touch test either. Well, I was really bad at henge because it used so little chakra I always broke it, but I found I could do it if I pushed the chakra through my body and spent the extra inside instead of just putting it over me. Kakashi Sensei had previously compared Naruto's attempt at a D-rank jutsu to filling a glass from a dam hatch, saying that no matter how careful you were with the glass, it would break unless you did something about the water pressure. Although Hibari Sensei's tablets had improved his control in the route, it was still nothing to brag about. Sai said slowly, Firefly, that sounds more like a ninjutsu, and Naruto realized that he had never explained to him how he did it before. Yes, he was aware that altering the body with ninjutsu was supposed to be extremely dangerous, but the academy teachers, aside from Iruka Sensei, were to blame. Under the adorable, if somewhat insane looking, lamb mask, he could almost see Sai rolling his eyes at him. Nobody told me henge was supposed to be genjutsu before I made this, he grumbled. What if, without the Byakugan, it was possible to see through things? Gaara could see with his sand eyeball, but since he used pure chakra instead of sand, perhaps he could see through it in some way. With a sharp command, Firefly. Kahai, please pay attention. Fu-san made Naruto rubber his hair in embarrassment. They were all Konoha ninja, so they were allies, and in addition to that, Sai and Tomiko-chan were also friends. Silence prevailed as he said, sorry, but I just got the coolest idea. Finally, Fu-san said, there are several academy teachers I would like to kill for wasting a resource like you. Naruto was caught between being blustery because he wasn't a resource and happy because his new team leader thought he was smart. Kami, damn it. Alright. You are Yagami Sakari, Ram, and Natsu, Firefly. You are siblings traveling to the capital of Ta no Kuni to live with your spouse. Just one husband. What a scumbag. To geld him, I'm heading there. It was frightening how well Fu-san could glare through the mask. Perhaps he had some secret chakra eyeball jutsu. Naruto declared, only to wilt a moment later. You are their older brother, Yagami Toshiro, who escorts them, horse. Natsu-san, you'll figure out a way to incorporate the Oroku no jutsu into our weapons and packs tonight, Fu-san said, sounding as though it tasted unclean. It's a good way to hide my poisons, so I'll be traveling the same route as you. Masahiko Furiko, a traveling medicine vendor. We will travel as civilians tomorrow. He gave Naruto one final approving glance before turning to set up their camp while simultaneously reciting the specifics of their cover story. Once more, Naruto had no idea how things were supposed to work, but it worked for him. If he had known that casting ninjutsu, henge, which is an improbability in and of itself, on something that didn't have its own chakra system and wasn't part of him, well, he would have found a way to do it eventually. Instead, he simply cast the domestic version of Oroku no Jutsu on their weapons and packs, poked Fu-san, and then spent the rest of the evening teaching them how to apply and cancel it, as well as the ins and outs of regular Oroku no Jutsu, of course. They discovered the following day that, of course, being a civilian had its own set of issues. Less than a day's journey by Shinobi from Takigakure, there was an infamous nest of bandits, known as the Brotherhood of Lawless Assassins. One might wonder how they managed to survive there for so long and conclude that they were permitted for some reason, but few non. Shinobi did because, at best, it would have taken 3 days, with 2 fast horses, and most people were unaware of Shinobi's capabilities. Most clients didn't wonder, period. Bandits were like cockroaches. They were everywhere, hard to eradicate, and a part of the landscape. They serve as Takigakure's scapegoat for the crimes they perpetrate nearby. It's not very plausible, but in the game, it makes no difference. Fu-san told Naruto, "You must be able to prove your accusations." They were walking slowly toward a small ravine where 5 men were crouching, struggling to stay hidden, with one man's gold tooth reflecting sunlight and no one bothering to mask their chakra, go under the wind, or take a bath first. How about customers? If these clowns attacked people en route, wouldn't Taki become enraged? Naruto inquired. I think they have a quota and are told not to attack anyone who looks important. They will eventually become too arrogant and be replaced. Fu-san managed to drop his sandal, and they all paused to wait while he fastened it again. Grab the women. Lovely brunette, we'll see how well you roll. Good rack. Tiny snippets of hushed speech drifted in their direction, along with an abundance of creative profanity. Tomiko. Chan sighed, trouble ahead. Naruto assessed the situation as Hibari Sensei had taught him to. There were 7 bandits, who were easy to beat but shouldn't be able to, and there was nowhere to hide the bodies, and the presence of bandit bodies, whether alive or dead, would greatly expose them. Hey, I've got a thought. How about we allow ourselves to be captured and then Tomiko Chan rescues Fu-chan? Naruto brightened. Though he sounded thoughtful, Fu-san stated, that idea is not entirely without merit, but there is little chance they would send someone of her caliber to deal with small fry like these. It might be for the best to allow ourselves to be caught and then escape, he said. We can say that they were intoxicated to the point of being stupid. Nobody regards bandits with enough respect to suspect that story. Naruto grinned grimly. And we'll be able to teach those bastards some good manners, he said. As they continued walking in the bright morning light, it appeared for a moment that the bandits would not attack after all, but then Naruto heard a feminine sounding shriek and the big, burly, ugly man, who was practically a small mountain with ham-sized biceps and a very small neck, leap and grab his arm as Naruto passed the one with the gold tooth. His experience with feminine shrieks, of course, consisted primarily of Sakura Chan's indignant shrieking followed by a punch, so he actually made the man take a half step back while holding onto his arm. Oh no, robbers! What should we do? Sai made a tiny sound that sounded almost like a snort as he attempted to correct the situation by dramatically raising his left hand to his forehead in an attempt to appear faint. This clearly wasn't how it was supposed to go, but the bandits weren't going to let that stop them. They quickly surrounded the small group, laughing anticipatorily as they made menacing movements with their large knives and staffs. However, Naruto was the only one who made even a flimsy attempt to look scared, and a few of the disheveled faces started to take odd, vaguely uneasy looks. Give us all your money and stuff and we maybe let you go, the prisoner who was holding Naruto's arm told Tomiko Chan. And women stay too. He pressed Naruto against his chest and reached out to touch him. The man screamed like a stuck pig and doubled over, letting go of Naruto as he reached back between them, grabbed, pulled, and twisted hard. During his training with Hibari Sensei, Naruto was shocked by how much someone held in the classic hostage position, back to the attacker's chest, arm around neck, could do. He was even more shocked to learn that even a face.to face knee to the groin was a mistake because it threw the performer off balance and was easily blocked by a simple twist of the hips or a leg shift. The alternative move Hibari Sensei taught him had the advantage of working in this back to chest position as well. Aid! Someone is harassing me. Big brother Toshiro, save me from this brute! He cried. Said brute was unconscious at his feet and couldn't have threatened a newborn kitten, but his face, her face in this instance, was pale and terrified. One of the thugs yelled, "We are gonna fucking make her regret that," and advanced on Naruto. The others snarled and pressed in close, but Tomiko Chan effortlessly grabbed the man's arm and pinned it behind his back, causing him to drop to his knees. When she said, You are going to take us all hostage and bring us to your base, or else. Sai grinned eerily and cracked his knuckles. Or else we let Natsu-chan practice gelding with you lot, he said smilingly. The Brotherhood of Lawless Assassins was led by Hiro, who could read and considered himself to be an educated man, which may also have contributed to the Brotherhood's name. His sons were not just nameless thugs, rather, they had class, or at least that was Hiro's opinion, and no one had publicly argued the point. Hadn't he even been able to make an agreement with a real ninja village? He chose not to give much thought to the fact that any one skilled shinobi could have killed them all whenever they felt like it. No one, save perhaps father, could recall whether Big Brother was the eldest of father's children, but it didn't really matter. He had earned the nickname Big not because he was old, but because of his size, and no one wanted to take it away from him. He wasn't very nimble, and he had never learned much technique, but that was because he had never needed to. He wasn't as stupid as he appeared, and his monstrous strength made him a formidable opponent. Anything he punched, from wild boars to smaller structures, stayed down for the count. He was never in a particularly pleasant mood, and most of the time, even father left him alone. No one was shocked, therefore, when Big Brother's group made a successful return, even bringing 3 very attractive women and 1 other hostage with them. His imposing figure darkened the room, blocking out the afternoon sunlight from the doorway for a brief moment. The door had long since met its maker. The inmates entered after him, followed by his men. There was a pretty, buxom brunette with a sinful little mouth and delicious hips, 1 woman with inky black hair, and an older but still attractive redhead with a medicine seller's backpack. They didn't appear to be very roughed up, so they must have done the right thing and surrendered without a fight, but there was something strange going on. Why had they taken the man as well? The Brotherhood wasn't big on accepting non-conventional sexual preferences. Father said, "Good work, Big Brother," but why didn't the inmates appear frightened? The brunette appeared to be frightened, but she seemed to enjoy it far too much. "So, this is where you hide out." It was a little dirty, but so what? These women were bandits, not maids, and if it bothered them, they could even steal white aprons and black miniskirts for them. "Well, you could do worse than an inn," the redhead said, sounding unimpressed. "And we're going to start by getting rid of that bad attitude you have. Would you mind witnessing your man being tortured?" Anticipating their entreaty, he inquired. Big Brother whimpered and fell to his knees after the brunette kicked him. He muttered in a broken voice, "Mommy, too strong, big knife." His men, still armed and presumably dangerous, cowered in corners. Since the dining room had only 4 corners, a small altercation broke out over who should get the last one, Baby Brother or I Kogoro. The ring of trembling blades, clubs, and staffs was greeted with amusement. The man, perkiness, brunette, nothing at all, black, haired, and general alarm as the prisoners dispersed across the floor. Father offered with a false sense of confidence, "Surrender now and we may consider being merciful," and the redhead raised 1 graceful eyebrow. "Unfortunately, we are by ourselves in the bandits' den. Now, who can assist us?" With excitement, the brunette recited. "Natsu-chan, you don't have to act fake." Everyone tensed, but the black-haired woman only took a paper and a brush dipped in ink, and a detached part of father's mind questioned how she had done so. "We don't have to fear hostile eyes anymore," she said, and her hand vanished into her long sleeves. "For a short time, we are your prisoners. We'll get out once you're both unconscious from drinking. We'll let you live as long as you swear to verify this story, because killing unconscious men in cold blood would make us look awful," she said, letting her brush fly across the paper. It hurt a lot after that, and they were really unconscious at the end. The sun had set and the wind was cold, so Fu-san ordered watch, and Naruto took the first turn just so he could sleep without interruption once he did. He made his trusty cage bunchen and spread them all over their small camp, sitting on the bank of the rice field, his muscles aching a little, but in a good way after a day well spent. He stared off into the distance, where he could barely see the small, darker patch that was the forest near the hidden village, lost in his thoughts, thinking about Gaara and how things were for Fu-chan, how confusing it was to have 2 Fus around, and how much he missed his team, even though Sai, Hibari, Sensei, Tomiko, Chan, and Man Fu were awesome too, and he had learned more with them than during his entire academy time and ninja career combined. He assumed that even though the man had only kicked him off a cliff, he should give Ero Sensei credit for summoning Gamabunta, assuming Rasengan didn't count. He said, "This day was fun, too," and leaned back, wondering about this mission as he tore off little patches of green grass and tossed them into the water. His thoughts were interrupted when Tomiko Chan approached him and sat down next to him, even though she should have been sleeping. At first, it hadn't seemed that strange. Of course he would help his fellow Jinchuriki in need, but all this sneaking around was pretty funny business. Why couldn't they just go there openly and tell them that creepy S-class terrorists were after one of their kunoichi? Something was off here. Natsu. Chan, what do you believe being a shinobi means? Although technically he was still a trainee, he had a mask and a name, as foolish as they were, and Tomiko. Chan referred to him as a junior officer. Naruto preferred it when she called him Kahai because it meant she considered him a true ANBU. Shinobi defend their nation, village, and people. They accomplish their goals and bring honor to their village. And earn a living on the side, Naruto forced himself to add. After all, even the most amazing people had to eat, pay their rent, and consume delicious ramen. The way you put it, self first, mission second, and comrades first. Naruto had never considered using those terms, but it was a good way to put it, so he nodded. Tomiko. Chan asked, casually hugging her knees. Did you know that a distorted version of an ANBU principle is what I said? The ANBU's motto is, mission first, comrades second, and self last. Naruto saw red, not the Kyuubi kind of red that made his blood pound in his ears and his fingers itch like they should have had claws instead of soft human fingernails. They had used blowpipes to target Hibari Sensei when all she had needed was someone to reassure her that everything would be alright. Sasuke had attempted to defect to Oto because he couldn't become strong in Konoha, despite the fact that it was there that Itachi had become so strong. Neji had vented his pain on Hinata. The only person in their clan who was truly sorry, innocent, and always nice, Haku-kun had to die before that jerk Zabuza finally admitted he liked him, and people just made their own and everyone else's lives as difficult as possible before sitting around complaining that it was so inevitable. To avoid traumatizing oneself doesn't require miracles. Naruto recalled what Iruka Sensei had once said to him, immediately following the exams but before they had left to protect Koyuki. Chan. No matter how fortunate and sheltered they are, there are always happy people, and there are also people who are miserable and cause all kinds of problems for themselves. He was proud of his decision to choose happiness, which has given him the greatest wealth of all. Those of us who choose to live as ninjas become instruments to be used for more important tasks. It doesn't matter if we are happy or not, Tomiko. Chan said in a toneless voice that made Naruto want to strike his head against something solid, perhaps her thick skull. And how does it benefit Konoha to be unhappy and then pass away from an ulcer at a young age? Furthermore, would you do a mission for them right away if you were apprehended by a foreign village and told to do so because you were caught? Naruto couldn't fathom any of these individuals, who took such pride in being tools, acting in such a submissive manner. Obviously not. I will always and forever be devoted to Konoha. Even though she was whispering, her voice remained as intense as ever. There you have it. Because tools work for whoever picks them up, you are not a tool. Loyalty requires a person. Tomiko. Chan pinched the bridge of her nose as if she had a headache and bowed her head to conceal her face for a moment. Aside from the analogies, do you not feel that you have a romanticized view of the world? Do you genuinely think that people like us could have a happy ending? She reminded Naruto of someone whose heart had also been brittle and frozen in all her white, gray glory. Of course there won't be any happy endings if people don't make them, and I'm not gonna be unhappy, thus the decision. What if I told you that this hypothetical situation is behind me and that I've moved on? Tomiko. Chan inquired, looking as interested as a cat and actually gazing at Naruto as if he were a two-headed calf or some other natural oddity. You've just fled, in my opinion. You haven't moved on. Theoretically, Naruto said, causing Tomiko Chan to avert her gaze for a moment. However, when she turned back to face him, her body was at ease and her face revealed nothing, like that of a porcelain doll. I'm interested in you. You disregard the world around you, and thus far, it has complied with your wishes. I don't know if this is your luck or your ability, but... Tomiko. Chan got up, and Naruto did too. He noticed that her speech had changed, as if she was allowing him to see through some barrier that had previously existed. She was now more formal, but she also seemed more relaxed and expressive. Tomiko. Chan actually took a step to the side, surprised by his response, but Naruto didn't care. He was the type of person who learned with his body and reacted with his body, mind following behind, and he leapt, wrapping his arms around her neck. Sai had already learned that friendship didn't feel the same if you didn't make them feel it, and he had given up fighting when Naruto gave him a noogie. Tomiko. Chan was a full head taller than he was, and her back didn't bend under the sudden weight, so Naruto's feet were left hanging in the air as he tried to squeeze it all from her lungs. What's the matter? Tomiko. Chan hissed, pushing him back down. Koyuki, who reminded Naruto of Koyuki. Hime. Chan, before thawing, was a very proud goddess, with a high and offended tilt of her head. She looked like some sort of winter goddess, with her porcelain pale face and ash pale hair fluttering in the wind, almost colorless in the dark, wearing the white cloak of the squad leader she had taken from Fu.San as soon as they had left Konoha behind to divert the potential enemy's attention. As Naruto said, "Thanks for trusting me," Tomiko's entire body jerked as if someone had run a lightning jutsu through it. Ouch, he thought, recalling the sound of water and chirping birds. "You are better than I thought," she whispered. "Natsu. Kahai, let's place a bet. Make the most of your one chance to persuade me that you are capable of changing my life." "If I win, what do I get?" he inquired. "You have a single surviving relative." She dangled the one thing Naruto would do nearly anything for in front of his face, which was cruel of her, but she had forgotten how to not be cruel when she wanted something, and she wasn't sure if she wanted to be proven right or wrong. "If you can convince me, I will tell you who they are," she said. Not quite as cool as Flea on sight, but Naruto would feel vindicated anyhow, and she, Tomiko, was unaware that one day they would list Naruto's luck under special abilities in Iwa and Mizu bingo books and there would be warnings to flee rather than bet with him. Tsunade had already learned not to bet on Uzumaki Naruto. Day 16 halves, Count of Suborns 2. The surveillance seal captured the Root Squad entering the Takigakure security zone while posing as civilians.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.